Chapter 759. But to be honest, if it weren't for Wuming's good ears and being close enough to Quiet Hassan, Wuming might not have been able to hear Quiet Hassan's words. Such a weak and incomparably weak voice, coupled with the injuries on Quiet Hassan's body. It seemed that Quiet Hassan was tortured by Ogdadi. As for Quiet Hassan's no, Wuming naturally knew why. Cursed Wrist Hassan had given Wuming information that Quiet Hassan's entire body was highly toxic, whether it was his skin, hair, or even body fluids. Ordinary people would die as soon as they touched him. And even servants might not be able to resist Quiet Hassan's poison. Therefore, Cursed Wrist Hassan told Wuming that he should not easily come into contact with Quiet Hassan. However, as the root dragon, Wuming was naturally not afraid of any poison, even if it was the body of a servant. Otherwise, why would Wuming cheat on the body of a servant? However, Quiet Hassan was also a girl. Since she said no, Wuming would not force her. Spirit power was launched, and Quiet Hassan was suspended in the air at a very close distance from Wuming. Sigh. Quiet Hassan was obviously puzzled by his current state. "Don't be afraid, this is my ability," Wuming said, spreading his hands, and his body naturally flew up, just like Quiet Hassan. The embodiment of spirit power is a good choice to control the flight of objects. Quiet Hassan was a little overwhelmed. He didn't know if it was because he was too weak, but Quiet Hassan seemed a little absent-minded. "By the way, I'm not afraid of your poison," Wuming finally emphasized. Quiet Hassan was taken aback, but then he returned to normal. "Maybe he has the ability to resist poison, but in the face of my poison, I'm afraid it won't have much effect." Quiet Hassan thought so, and finally dispelled the fantasy in his mind. Were you really invited here by Baitsu?" Immediately after, Quiet Hassan asked. After all, when Wuming came in, Quiet Hassan clearly saw that Wuming was wearing the Holy City's armor, and it was not mass-produced, but similar to the unique armor of the Knights of the Round Table. Moreover, it was always right to be cautious. As an assassin, Quiet Hassan would naturally be more cautious. He would not completely trust someone just because someone came to save him, unless the other party could resist his poison. Thinking of this, Quiet Hassan's heart hesitated. If what he said before, "not afraid of my poison," was true, then to believe him. While Hassan was deep in thought, Wuming spoke. "I am indeed a member of the Knights of the Round Table, but I am not a Knight of the Lion King. I am a Knight of King Arthur," Vero Cyrus said. Wuming did not want to hide it because there was no need to, so Wuming calmly told Quiet Hassan his true identity. "Lion King. King Arthur." Quiet Hassan carefully read the meaning of Wuming's words. In the end, Quiet Hassan chose to believe Wuming. After all, there was no other choice at the moment. She did not believe that Wuming could do anything. If the other party was a bad guy, with her current state and the other party's means of moving her without touching her, she was already a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. And if the other party was a good guy, then Quiet Hassan had no worries. "Thank you for your trust. I will take you back to the village of the mountain people." However, at this moment, a voice full of Buddhism sounded. "That benefactor over there, can you save me while you're at it?" This voice was a woman's voice, and it sounded like she had been hungry for several days. Wuming looked at the source of the voice. It was a small prison carved out of the surrounding stone walls. Not only there, but there were also many small prisons carved out in other parts of the surrounding stone walls. The Buddha-like voice was the person in the prison that Wuming looked at. However, because the surroundings were too dark, Wuming could not see the appearance of the person locked inside. Who is locked in there? Wuming looked at Quiet Hassan subconsciously. After all, Quiet Hassan was an old person here, so naturally, he knew more about the prisoners in the prison than Wuming. However, to Wuming's regret, Quiet Hassan did not know either. "I'm not very sure. I only know that the person was caught by Agmaguyen a few days ago." "Well, let me introduce myself. I'm a monk, Sanzang." As if hearing the conversation between Wuming and Quiet Hassan, the person who asked for help began to introduce himself. "Sanzang." Wuming was taken aback. The only person who could be called Sanzang was the sorcerer, who took 3 apprentices and rode the white dragon horse to the west to pray for scriptures. "Tang Sanzang?" Wuming asked. "Aha. That's right, that's me. Tang Sanzang was so excited that he suddenly threw himself on the iron frame of the prison and looked at Wu Ming and Quiet Hassan with a hopeful look. A girl with long straight black hair and big breasts wearing a monk's robe, a monk's hat, and holding a monk's staff appeared in front of Wu Ming. Ha! Wu Ming was shocked and screamed. Are you Tang Sanzang? Wu Ming knew that Tang Sanzang was a male monk. Even if he knew that Tang Sanzang in this world was a woman through the voice just now, Wu Ming couldn't imagine that Tang Sanzang in this world was a beautiful girl with big breasts. A beautiful girl was still within the scope of understanding. After all, legend had it that Tang Sanzang's flesh could be immortal, so it was understandable that it could nourish oneself and make oneself a beautiful girl. However, no matter what, she should be a shaved head and dressed conservatively. Wu Ming even suspected that the monsters on the road to the west did not want to catch Tang Sanzang because of her immortality, but because of her beauty. Then were the 3 apprentices of Tang Sanzang also. Well, can you help me out? Tang Sanzang smiled awkwardly. Shaking his head, Wu Ming shook his head to get rid of his thoughts, and waved the meteor silver. Ka-dash! The prison that trapped Tang Sanzang instantly shattered. Great, I'm saved. Tang Sanzang exhaled a long breath and walked out with his staff. Ba, thank you for saving my life, benefactor. Tang Sanzang uttered a Buddhist name, his palm vertical, and bowed to Wu Ming. Master Sanzang, you don't have to be so courteous. I wonder why you are imprisoned here. After all, he was a Tang dynasty great master, and Wu Ming was still very polite. However, just as Tang Sanzang was about to answer Wu Ming, the whole prison suddenly exploded. Boom! Chapter 760. A few kilometers away from the prison castle, the solemn knights lined up neatly. Aguin, who was originally unconscious, had also woken up at this moment, and was standing in front of the solemn knights. However, even if he woke up, Aguin's appearance and state were still not good. His messy hair was mixed with blood, his pale face, coupled with broken armor, he looked very embarrassed and weak. But even so, Aguin still stood straight, watching the series of explosions in the prison castle at this moment. After all, such a big castle, without special means, it was impossible to blow it up in an instant. Let's meet again in the holy city Villo. There was no doubt that the big explosion in the prison castle was Aguin's masterpiece. Aguin's face was gloomy. He waved his hand, and the solemn knights set off in the direction of the holy city. Aguin, on the other hand, was knocked out again by the solemn knights. After a while, the explosion in the prison castle ended. The whole prison castle turned into ruins, and even some places were burning, which was particularly conspicuous in the dark night. Behind a big stone around the ruins, the figures of Wu Ming's trio appeared. Except for Tang Sanzang's clothes, which were a bit messy, purely because of the shock, no one had the slightest damage. Even Wu Ming's clothes were clean. Tang Sanzang breathed a sigh of relief, patted his huge chest, and looked like he had survived a disaster. It really scared me. I thought I was really going to see Buddha this time. However, Tang Sanzang had already gone to see Buddha, otherwise, it was impossible for him to appear in the form of a servant. Although this great wizard seemed to be powerless, he was indeed a caster servant. Thank you for saving this poor monk's life again, Tang Sanzang said, looked at Wu Ming behind him and bowed again. It's nothing. Wu Ming nodded. When the explosion occurred, Wu Ming immediately used the portal to teleport Tang Sanzang, Quiet Hassan, and himself here. Then Wu Ming looked at the prison castle that had turned into ruins and walked over. Aguin must have buried a large amount of gunpowder under the prison. Wu Ming checked the traces of the explosion. Although Wu Ming had never seen gunpowder before, he could still make a simple guess. It was mainly made up of non-mystical weapons such as explosives, supplemented by mystical means such as magic. That was why Wu Ming did not discover the explosives buried under the prison castle. After all, if it was just a simple magic explosive, Wu Ming would have sensed it the moment it got close to the prison castle. However, thanks to ordinary explosives, Wu Ming wouldn't be killed by such an explosion. Aguin seemed to be aware of this, which was why he muttered to himself, "See you again in the holy city." From the looks of it, there were only 2 reasons for the explosion in the prison castle. Firstly, he wanted to destroy the information here. Secondly, he wanted to leave some harsh words to Wuming before he left. Although Wuming and the others were not affected, Wuming still felt that it was a pity. I wanted to see if there were any other servants in the prison. After all, if there was a good servant, he could pull it over as a helper or something. As a result, this trip to rescue Quiet Hassan saved a powerless Tang Sanzang. Ah, by the way, my apprentice is also locked in this prison. Tang Sanzang seemed to be inspired by Wuming and suddenly shouted. Oh. Wuming was a little helpless. Only now did you remember that your apprentice was locked in here. I'm afraid she has been blown back to the martyr's palace. Wuming felt that Tang Sanzang had no dignity for him at all. And there was no need to respect such a girl with the title of Tang Dynasty Great Mage. Tang Sanzang also realized his problem, so he smiled awkwardly. After all, I'm really hungry. It's not easy to support myself and talk to the benefactor. However, Wuming was concerned about the apprentice mentioned by Tang Sanzang. The apprentice you are talking about shouldn't be the great sage, heaven's equal, martial canopy, and the curtain-lifting general. Then the holy city might have been destroyed long ago. Well, yes, it's not Wukong. That apprentice is my new apprentice in this world. Tang Sanzang nodded naturally. Then Tang Sanzang had a regretful expression. If he was still here, we wouldn't have to starve. After all this time, it was still a matter of whether they were hungry or not. But when it came to the issue of hunger, Wuming looked at Quiet Hassan, who was leaning against a huge stone. She had not spoken since leaving the prison castle. Wuming could see that she was actually hungry. I'm not hungry, Quiet Hassan said weakly. Grumble. However, Quiet Hassan's stomach betrayed her, which made Quiet Hassan blush. Of course, because she was wearing a mask, Wuming couldn't see it, but through Quiet Hassan's subconscious lowering of her head, Wuming could almost guess it. I don't blame you. During the time when you were held captive, you must have been worried about your next meal. If you don't give them food, they will starve to death. Don't doubt it. After all, the masterless followers also relied on food to replenish their magic power. Without food for a long time, they will also die. However, their death would only bring them back to the martyr's palace. However, giving them too much food would not be conducive to interrogation. So Wuming guessed that during the time when Quiet Hassan was captured, she must not have eaten a good meal. The interrogation and lack of food caused Quiet Hassan's body to be so weak. Of course, Tang Sanzang was fine. It was purely because she had been imprisoned for too short a time. Quiet Hassan had said before that Tang Sanzang had just been imprisoned for a few days. Wuming waved one hand, and a golden ripple appeared beside Wuming. This startled her, for fear that Wuming would do something to her. Don't be afraid, this is my noble artifact. Wuming comforted Quiet Hassan, and then the golden ripple spat out a tube of red potion. Reaching out to catch the potion, Wuming handed it to Quiet Hassan. This is a healing potion to restore vitality. Drink it. It had to be said that the game was a bug compared to reality, such as resurrection. The most common healing potion in the game also had extraordinary abilities. Vitality was not something that could be healed when injured, but the loss of vitality was not so easy to repair. However, the game's health potion was able to do so easily. The most amazing thing was that it could even repair the broken clothes on the body. Of course, the premise was that the clothes on the body were not strong armor. However, Quiet Hassan did not take Wuming's potion. To put it simply, Tranquil Hassan was still vigilant. Seeing Tranquility Hassan like this, Wuming shook his head helplessly. Then, Wuming walked to Tranquility Hassan. Under Tranquility Hassan's incredulous gaze, Wuming pulled Tranquility Hassan's hand and placed the potion in her hand. Chapter 761. Like I said, I'm not afraid of your poison, Wuming said calmly, as if he was not poisoned at all. Immediately afterward, Wuming continued to speak. If I have evil intentions, I don't need to trick you to drink the potion at all. Wouldn't it be better to force it on you? After all, after being able to ignore Quiet Hassan's poison, Quiet Hassan could be said to be completely unable to compete with Wuming. Quiet Hassan looked blankly at his wrist that was grabbed by Wuming and Wuming's hand that grabbed his wrist, then looked at the potion in his palm, and was in a daze. Drink it. This potion can not only heal injuries, but also alleviate hunger. As soon as he finished speaking, Wuming heard a hee-hee sound from behind him. Can you give me a tube too, hee-hee? Tang Sanzang smiled and looked at Wuming. After all, she was also hungry. It didn't matter to her whether it could increase vitality or not. After all, she was a big piece of meat. For Tang Sanzang, being able to fill his stomach was the most important thing. Just as he was about to take out another tube of health potion from the golden ripples that had not yet closed, the sound of stones rolling came. Walalalo dash immediately afterward. Wuming discovered the servant's reaction. Who is it? Wuming raised his meteor silver and pointed it to the side of the ruins of the prison castle. The sound of stones rolling came from there, and the servant's magic power that Wuming discovered also came from there. And it was a servant that Wuming had never seen before. Wait a minute. At this time, Tang Sanzang suddenly shouted. Is it Fuda? Fuda? Wuming frowned. The name sounded like a name from Japan. The Tang dynasty's great mage received a Japanese apprentice in the Middle East. Although it was a bit awkward, of course, the other party was a servant after all. It was understandable to be able to experience such an encounter across time and space. I didn't expect this prison to explode. A man with green hair and a ponytail walked out from the shadows. He was carrying a bag of Japanese rice. Although he sounded relaxed, the tattered clothes and armor on his body, as well as the bloodstains and injuries on his body, made it clear that he must have gone through some adventure to survive the explosion of the prison castle. Great! Tung Tai, it's great that you're all right. Tang Sanzang seemed very excited. It seemed like her disciple was still very important to her. Then, quickly use your rice bag to cook for your master. Your master is already very hungry. Wuming sighed. As expected of Master Sanzang. However, the bag of rice was quite big. If there was rice in it, it should be enough to last for many days. I want to, but this little brother doesn't seem to trust me. The man named Tung Tai scratched the back of his head and looked at Wuming with a headache. This was because Wuming was still pointing his sword at Tung Tai. After all, I still can't judge whether you are Tang Sanzang's disciple. In other words, Wuming suspected that the other party was in disguise. After all, the person in charge here was a Greco. If he had a servant who could change into others, it might be true. After all, it was a Greco. Although it was impossible to survive the big explosion just now, Wuming still remembered what Tang Sanzang said before. Her disciple was also locked in this prison. That is to say, the other party escaped the big explosion while being imprisoned. The probability of being able to escape while being trapped is too low. Regarding this, I have evidence to prove that I escaped from the prison. It seemed that he saw Wuming's intention. The man named Tung Tai turned around and began to move the stone. Quiet Hassan and Tang Sanzang were at a loss. The two of them couldn't understand what Tung Tai was doing. With the sound of the stone moving, a fragrance came to everyone's nose. It smells so good, Quiet Hassan suddenly had a big appetite. The fragrance of rice? On the contrary, Tang Sanzang recognized what this fragrance was for the first time. It gave people the feeling that they often ate it. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was flabbergasted. First of all, how did he make the rice in an instant? Where did he get it from? Wu Ming took a closer look. In the cracks of the ruins, under the stone fragments, there was a lot of cooked rice. The man named Tung Tai just moved the stone that pressed the rice, which let the fragrance of the rice pass into the nose of the three people. This must be the rice produced by your noble phantasm, Tung Tai. Tang Sanzang, who also came over, analyzed. A noble phantasm that produces rice? Wuming was stunned. This was a bit interesting. Rice bag, Tung Tai Japan, there were keywords. If Alice was here, she should be able to analyze who the servant in front of her was in an instant. There was no way, Wuming could not bear to read so many books, so he simply took the opportunity to transfer a large number of books to Alice's database. After all, Alice was Wuming's gift. The possibility of separation was very low, so Wuming was so relieved. However, who would have thought that Gidea's strength was somewhat beyond Wuming's expectation? Or Wuming did not expect that the other party would detonate the black mud, and wanted to kill Wuming. When he thought of this, Wuming remembered that his body was still in the Hakata world. I have to hurry up. Whether it was the repair of the singularity or the journey to find the body in the Hakata world, he had to hurry up. Let me introduce myself. My real name is Itating Tai, and my class is Archer. The rice is produced by my noble phantasm, the endless rice bag. The man whose real name was Itatung Tai said while patting the Japanese rice bag he was carrying. As for how Itatung Tai survived, looking at the rice in the stone ruins, he must have used the endless rice as a defensive means to substantially resist the explosion. Sure enough, food was the greatest. Of course, if you still don't believe me, then look at this. Itatung Tai said as he put the rice bag he was carrying on the ground and opened the lid. In an instant, rice swarmed out of the rice bag. Wah! Itatung Tai, don't waste the food, Tang Sanzang shouted and rushed in front of the rice bag, trying to pick up the rice scattered on the ground. I believe you. Seeing this scene, Wuming nodded and put the meteor silver into the golden ripple. Although Wuming did not know the man whose real name was Itatung Tai, he should be the one who could use this noble phantasm called the endless rice bag. Thank you for your trust. Itatung Tai laughed, then covered the rice bag and put it back on his shoulder. So Master Sanzang and Itatung Tai, do you have any plans next? Chapter 762. My original plan was to wander around and explore the local customs. However, I don't think I'll be able to do that, Tang Sanzang said regretfully. Putting aside the fact that this singularity was on the verge of destruction, Tang Sanzang had already been captured once. She did not dare to wander around. What if she was captured by the people of the holy city again? If possible, I'd like to find a place to stay. Katingta scratched his head, looking simple and honest. However, that's not possible. After all, this world doesn't seem to be able to hold on any longer, Tang Sanzang said seriously. Wuming was taken aback. Master Sanzang, can you feel the collapse of this singularity? Tang Sanzang nodded matter-of-factly. Of course I can feel it. This world is very similar to the aura I felt in the Great Tang. Wuming was enlightened. This meant that Tang Sanzang's background in obtaining the Western scripture was not as simple as it seemed. However, that had nothing to do with Wuming. What Wuming needed to do now was to pull these two to his side. After all, there was strength in numbers, right? I'm currently helping the Master of Chaldea save this singularity. Are you interested in helping? I don't have any combat ability. Are you sure you want me to join? Tang Sanzang looked embarrassed. Tang Sanzang had no intention of refusing, but he had a clear understanding of his own combat ability. I don't really like fighting either. If possible, I'd prefer to study food, Katingta said. That's not a problem. Master Sanzang can stay in the village of the mountain people, and Katingta can also act as the village's guard. He'll be responsible for the safety of Master Sanzang and the villagers. However, the village of the mountain people is rather secluded, and there won't be any danger, Wuming suggested. Katingta nodded, but he did not make a decision immediately. Instead, he looked at Tang Sanzang. Then I'll leave this to my master, Master Sanzang. Me? What a headache. Tang Sanzang shook his head. He did not seem to be good at making decisions. Even so, Tang Xuanzang seemed to have made his decision long ago. All right, who asked you to save our lives? I'll bring Ting Tai and join your team. Thank you for joining us. Wuming smiled and nodded. No matter when, it was not a mistake to gather people, so Silent Wonder was happy to have two servants in the team. Although Master Sanzang could only be used as a spectator. Good. Then you are my second disciple. Tang Xuanzang looked very happy. Wuming, on the other hand, looked confused. What was going on? Beside Tang Sanzang, Itafuta revealed an expression that said, I knew it would turn out like this. Could it be that Yuting Tai was also like Wuming and was randomly taken in as a disciple by Tang Xuanzang? Although Itata had confusedly admitted that Tang Sanzang was his master, Itata still called Tang Sanzang Mage Sanzang. Therefore, the possibility of Wuming's guess was very high. Well, as long as you are happy, Master Sanzang. Wuming shrugged his shoulders. Anyway, he would not lose a piece of meat. Tang Sanzang could call him whatever he wanted. What does Quiet Hassan think? Wuming looked at Quiet Hassan. Although he came to save Quiet Hassan this time, he was a local. He had to ask Quiet Hassan's opinion, even if it was just for show. It's up to you. Quiet Hassan looked hesitant. This made Wuming confused again. Why are they all so strange? He shook his head and stopped thinking about these messy things. There's no time to lose, let's go. After that, Wuming opened the portal. Wuming, Quiet Hassan, Tang Sanzang, and Itafuta went in. In the blink of an eye, Wuming and the other three disappeared in place, leaving only the ruins of the prison castle and a little fire, flickering in the darkness. On the other side of the portal was the house of Gadatsi and others. Because they were going to the Yazril temple, there was no one here now. Wow, this is really amazing. Tang Sanzang, who was the first to walk out of the portal, commented on Wuming's portal. But the color doesn't look very comfortable. Although the color is not very good, this ability is really interesting. Itafuta was also interested in Wuming's portal. It's just a little trick, Wuming said modestly. Then Wuming glanced at Quiet Hassan. Because he had drunk the potion given by Wuming, Quiet Hassan had recovered a lot at the moment, and walking was not a problem at all. This is the residence of the Master of Chaldea. You can rest here now, Wuming said to the three of them. I'm so hungry, Itafuta, cook for me. Tang Sanzang looked directly at Itafuta. It can't be helped, Wuming hasn't given Tang Sanzang health potion yet, so Tang Sanzang is still hungry. Yes, Master Sanzang, I'll cook now, I'll borrow the kitchen. Itafuta said and walked out of the room to look for the kitchen. At this time, it was the middle of the night, and Wuming had no other tasks, so he simply wanted to ask Tang Sanzang some things in his spare time. Master Sanzang, have you been to the holy city? Tang Sanzang, who was preparing to travel to various places here, has naturally been to the holy city. Of course I have been there, and it was not long ago. Suddenly, Tang Sanzang thought of something. By the way, I seem to have been caught by His Excellency Aguawan not long after I left the holy city. Tang Sanzang smiled embarrassedly. But this is strange. Why didn't he catch Tang Sanzang when she was still in the holy city? And Quiet Hassan, who sat down with Wuming and Tang Sanzang, raised a question. Why didn't he catch you when you were still in the holy city? The reason why he didn't do anything to me in the holy city is that, although my thoughts are different from those of the holy city, the Lion King didn't think I was a threat, so he let me leave the holy city. After thinking for a while, Tang Sanzang continued to speak. Maybe His Excellency Aguawan acted without authorization. It was because he hid it from the Lion King that Aguawan detained Tang Sanzang in the hidden prison where Quiet Hassan was detained. If it was Aguawan, he would have done that. Wuming nodded thoughtfully. By the way, won't this place be discovered by the people of the holy city? I remember that they have been searching for the village of the mountain people. Tang Sanzang asked. In this regard, Wuming shook his head. The location of this village is very hidden, and it's basically impossible to find. However, just after Wuming finished speaking, there was an explosion. Boom. Chapter 763. Boom. The sound of the explosion came from outside the house. In an instant, Wuming activated his mental power to the maximum, wanting to see what happened. Then Ito ran in too hastily and said with a serious face, "Something happened, someone attacked the village." However, at this moment, Wuming also saw it. Located at the entrance of the village, there was black smoke at the moment, which was the residue of the explosion. Although the black smoke was dense, Wuming's mental power was not a pair of glasses, so he could see the enemy in the black smoke. There was only one enemy, fully armed with red and white armor, and on the tight helmet, the sharp horns like the devil looked particularly ferocious. Red magic lightning emitted from the knight's greatsword in the enemy's hand, and it turned out that the explosion at the entrance of the village was caused by this person. Mordred. Wuming said the name of the intruder. Mordred. Hearing Wuming's words, Quiet Hassan was shocked. That lunatic? How did that guy come here? Tang Sanzang also had a dignified expression. It seemed that she seemed to have met Mordred in the holy city, and the relationship between the two was not very good. However, the truth was simple. This place has been discovered. After Wuming finished speaking, he opened the portal and walked in. Destination: Where Mordred was, the entrance of Higashi village. When Wuming completely entered the portal closed instantly. In the end, only Wuming's voice remained in the air. The three of you, hurry up and cover the villagers to take refuge, please. To be honest, just as he said that the people of the Holy City would not find this place, the other party launched an attack. Although there was only one person, Wuming did not feel lucky. As one of the Knights of the Round Table, Wuming naturally knew Mordred. Mordred's fighting style was relatively wild, or rather, she fought like a berserker. It was impossible to tell that she was a Knight of Camelot. You could say that she did not use her brain, or that she was simple. Often, such people were the easiest to deal with. But at the same time, they were also the most difficult to deal with. For example, after becoming a servant, she would not hesitate to use her noble phantoms. Claret Blood Arthur. Boom. The earth was wailing, and the red lightning on the ground indicated that Mordred had once again used a noble artifact. Ah! What happened? What happened? Was there no one who could fight? I came here alone on purpose. I'm so disappointed. Mordred waved the king's sword, dispersing the red lightning on the blade, and dispersing the smoke and dust from the explosion. To be honest, she was afraid that she would blow up the entire village. Therefore, she released her noble phantasm with the least damage. She wanted to lure the servant out and punish him. After all, she was the Lion King's knight. As a knight, how could she blast away both the enemy and the existence? Of course, it was to kill the enemy and then blow up the village. Thinking of this, Mordred's face under the helmet revealed a sinister smile. However, what caught Mordred's eyes were only the villagers who woke up from their slumber, frantically fleeing, and a few burning houses. This is really disappointing. Then, let this blow end all of you, Mordred said, and once again raised the king's sword in front of her. Claret Blood Arthur. Magic gushed out from the king's sword, reaching the dark sky. Mordred didn't hold back anymore. It seemed like she was really going to destroy the village with her next attack, just as she had said she would. It's over, Mordred. A voice came from the village. Mordred paused when she heard the voice. She raised the king's sword that was emitting red lightning. Then Mordred laughed impudently. Villothoranciate, you are really here. Take this. After Mordred finished speaking, she squeezed her magic and increased the output of her noble phantasm. If Mordred's light pillar was as thick as a washbasin, then she was now raising a light pillar that was as thick as the pillars of a huge palace. As for Mordred, because of the overload, there was a crack in her armor. Since Mordred was so generous, Wuming naturally used his noble phantasm to fight back. Silver Meteor, Meteor Silver Splendor. A silver-white pillar rose from the ground in the direction of the village, standing opposite the red pillar that appeared outside the village. Then the two pillars collided together. Then, like a DNA spiral, the red and white pillars intertwined and spiraled into the sky. The DNA pillar that rushed into the clouds seemed to have some kind of chemical reaction, causing the clouds to change color. There were also traces of red and white lightning. Wuming and Mordred continued the output of the light cannon. Finally, as if unable to withstand the chemical reaction, the clouds rounded into a sphere and exploded directly. Because of the height, the ground was not affected by the explosion. However, the strong light from the explosion made the entire East Village as bright as day. However, this sun only lasted for a moment. In just a few seconds, the sun disappeared, and the day turned back to night. Although it was night time, the surrounding scene was still vaguely visible, because the explosion of the clouds had completely dispersed the dark clouds above and around East Village, allowing the moonlight to shine on the ground. If the houses that were still burning and the panicked people were removed, the moonlight shining on East Village would definitely be a beautiful scene. If Da Vinci was here, he would definitely be very impressed. Although there was no Da Vinci, others would also be impressed. So powerful. Silent Hassan, who had already walked out of the house, saw the scene just now. She was stunned by the effect of Wuming and Mordred's attack. Whether it was Mordred or Wuming, they were on a completely different level from her, the assassin. That's true. Itufuda nodded stiffly as he walked out of the house. If he had been able to unleash such a powerful light cannon, he wouldn't have had such a hard time dealing with the Terra no Massacado. What undying devil man! Under the judgment of the holy light cannon, not even dregs would be left. Tang Sanzang, on the other hand, nodded with satisfaction. As expected of my second disciple, this is much stronger than Beiji. Silent Hassan and Kodo Hira looked at Tang Sanzang helplessly, as if they were powerless to complain. Let's hurry up and guide the villagers. After Silent Hassan finished speaking, she left in a flash and returned to Tang Sanzang and Kodo Hira. But I'm so hungry. Tang Sanzang looked like he could not take it anymore. All right. I'll make you rice later. Let's go. On the other side, a black-haired man wearing a simple leather jacket and holding a bow and arrow was guiding the villagers away. As expected of the Knights of the Round Table, they're really powerful. The archer who had also seen the previous scene praised. However, it was only a praise. After all, the villagers were the most important. Chapter 764. With the entrance of the village as the dividing line, Mordred was on the outside while Wuming was on the inside. Both of them had temporarily put away their weapons. When the clouds exploded from their attacks, Wuming and Mordred's attacks were interrupted. Wuming's figure was also reflected in Mordred's eyes, because of the disappearance of the clouds. However, Mordred had no time to pay attention to Wuming. His armor was cracked, and he was panting heavily. He was using his sword to support his body, looking extremely tired. Wuming, who was in the village, was also not feeling well, but it was not as bad as Mordred's. Because he had used up too much mana in an instant, Wuming was only panting twice. Because his mana had been supplied to the tens of thousands of Skywings, and because the spiritual base's mana was not as good as his main body's, Wuming did not have much mana left. Therefore, using so much mana in an instant was still a bit of a burden for Wuming. However, for Mordred to be able to contend with Wuming, it was truly abnormal. Could it be that Mordred also has the Lion King's blessing? Wuming could only think of this possibility. This was also the most likely. Wuming had learned from Tristan that both he and Gawain had received the Lion King's blessing. In that case, it was not impossible for Mordred to also receive the Lion King's blessing. While Wuming was thinking, Mordred quickly adjusted his breathing, stood up straight, and pulled out the king's sword from the ground. He also took off his helmet. Pretty good, Villo. Let's go again. Mordred had a maniacal smile on his face, looking like a dying flash. Are you sure you can still do it? Wuming came back to his senses and looked at Mordred worriedly. Wuming believed that Mordred had no more strength left. His armor was cracked, and there were some bloodstains on his face. His spirit base was rather unstable. That's for sure. The Lion King bestowed me with a berserk blessing. I can continuously squeeze my spiritual base to release noble artifacts, so you don't have to worry at all. Mordred revealed a smile. However, this smile made Wuming feel rather sad. Wouldn't that be using Mordred to its fullest potential? Mordred's spiritual base was squeezed to the very last bit, until it could no longer be maintained. The energy that was squeezed out would be used on the enemies of the Holy City. Although it was harming others without benefiting herself, Mordred seemed to be quite happy about it. You don't need to meddle in other people's business. Villo, you have already become the Lion King's enemy. You don't have the qualifications to meddle in the Lion King's business. Just die for me. Mordred laughed arrogantly. He raised his king's sword and prepared to use another noble artifact. Hey Mordred, you also have memories of the Holy Grail War when you were in Romania, right? Since it's also, that means you also have memories of that. Mordred nodded. I remember that our relationship had eased a lot at that time. Do you really have to make things like this? Wuming was not willing to fight with the Knights of the Round Table from the beginning. Whether it was Tristan, Gawain, or Mordred, he was not willing to fight. Due to special circumstances, Gawain and Lancelot did not have any hostility towards Wuming when they met. Tristan did not listen to advice, so Wuming directly took him down. In the end, Wuming made a deal with Tristan and did not kill him. Gawain hated Wuming the most, but Wuming only destroyed Gawain's armor and weapon. Gawain fainted mostly because he was angry. The last one was Mordred in front of him. Because Mordred used a noble artifact, Wu-ming had no choice but to use a noble artifact to counteract it. However, in general, Wu-ming did not want to fight with the Knights of the Round Table. What nonsense are you talking about here? Yesterday's friend, today's enemy. Isn't this normal? As long as it's the Lion King's order, I, Mordred, will not hesitate to obey. As long as it's the Lion King's enemy, I, Mordred, will not hesitate to attack. You can only blame yourself for standing on the wrong side, Villo. After saying that, Mordred raised the king's sword up high, and scarlet lightning emerged from the king's sword again. However, Wu-ming, who was opposite Mordred, had a regretful expression. It's really sad. You have to know that you also have a trace of my bloodline. To put it simply, you are also my... Shut up. However, before Wu-ming could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Mordred's thunderous voice. My father is only the Lion King. Remember this. Mordred's eyes widened as if something forbidden had been touched. The blessing that the Lion King gave her was activated again. Her spiritual base was converted into magic power, and finally, her magic power was converted into a noble artifact. Boom! Mordred raised the king's sword up high and exploded with an unprecedented beam of light. The beam of light that Mordred raised had a diameter that was comparable to the diameter of the entire village. In the village, Xiao, who was guiding the villagers to take shelter, widened his eyes. Hey, it can't be right? This attack will definitely make us disappear. What should we do, Xiao? Quickly think of a way. Tang Sanzang grabbed Xiao neck and shook him. I can't do anything. I can only ask the Villo who has already rushed over. Xiao shook his head helplessly. Lord Villo. Quiet Hassan looked at the direction of the village entrance worriedly and murmured. The scene changed to the entrance of the village. Wu-ming sighed. Wu-ming frowned and looked at Mordred. With the power of this demon and your current spiritual base, you will disappear after this attack. There was no other way. Even through analysis, just by looking at it with the naked eye, he could see that Mordred would definitely disappear. The completely shattered armor revealed Mordred's calm expression. Her delicate skin had begun to crack. Blood flowed out from the cracked wound, and the wound was rapidly expanding. The blood that flowed out had begun to turn into magic power and dissipate. This was the precursor of the followers' exit. It doesn't matter at all. As long as I can get rid of you, traitor, the queen will be very happy. At this moment, Mordred, whose face was covered in blood, showed a naive smile. It was very strange. The traitor knight wants to help the queen, but he wants to eliminate me, the queen's close servant. There is nothing more ironic than this. Mordred was angry and wanted to say something, but Wu-ming immediately interrupted her. But you don't have a chance, Mordred. Chapter 765. Mordred's eyes narrowed. After Wu-ming finished speaking, Mordred already felt that something was wrong. Thus, Mordred hurriedly swung down her attack. However, just like what Wu-ming said, Mordred did not have a chance. Something was faster than her. The silver-white chains that were emitting a purple aura wrapped around Mordred's body. Her arms, thighs, abdomen, neck, and finally, the emperor sword that Mordred was holding high was wrapped up by the chains. At this moment, the sound of the chains entered Mordred's ears. Clang, clang, clang. The continuous sound of the chains came from behind Mordred. Mordred tilted her head slightly and saw a dark purple ripple. The chains were coming out from there. Although Mordred did not see where the ripple came from, needless to say, it was on Wu-ming's side. Damn it. How dare you trick me? Mordred struggled, trying to break free from the chains, but it was not effective. However, the enraged Mordred once again overdrew his spiritual base. In an instant, the strength of his muscles was raised to the extreme. In the form of monstrous strength, Mordred broke free from the shackles of the chains and waved the emperor's sword in his hand. However, it did not have any effect. X-Silver, Meteor Silver. Along with the release of a simple noble phantasm, a silver-white pillar of light collided with Mordred's attack. The atmosphere shook, and the airflow was like a storm that swept across the sky. However, in the end, Wu-ming's noble phantasm cancelled out Mordred's noble phantasm. Mordred, who had been bound by Wu-ming's annihilation lock for a while, No matter if it was her magic or the power of her noble phantasm, they were all destroyed by the annihilation lock. Even if Mordred overdrew her spiritual base again, her noble phantasm was just an arrow at the end of its flight. Therefore, Wu Ming's casual attack was able to cancel out Mordred's noble phantasm. Wu Ming shook his head silently, then looked at Mordred's direction. However, there was nothing in Mordred's position other than Wu Ming's annihilation lock. As soon as Mordred swung the Emperor's sword, due to the excessive collapse of her spirit base, she was forced to leave the stage. That's why it's best to talk less and do more. No matter if you're a villain or a real villain, you'll always fall because you talk too much. In fact, if Mordred hadn't been so crazy, she wouldn't have been forced out of the arena due to the excessive collapse of her spirit base. After all, the blessing given by the Lion King's Holy Grail was to go berserk and not die suddenly. Simply put, Mordred can still be saved. However, Mordred had chosen to self-destruct, and in the end, she did not succeed. Compared to a certain Stella, it was too embarrassing. However, leaving this place early isn't necessarily a bad thing. Goodbye, Mordred. Wu Ming seemed to be saying goodbye to Mordred. Is it over? A voice entered Wu Ming's ears. Wu Ming unhurriedly put away the annihilation lock and looked at the figure. Due to his mental strength, Wu Ming noticed the figure's arrival when it was still a distance away, so he was not surprised. It was the bow-wielding man who was busy evacuating the villagers. You must be Arash Kamengo, the great hero of Persia. Wu Ming showed kindness to the archer. I'm not a great hero. I'm just an archer who hopes to stop the war. Arash smiled and said humbly. However, this also meant that he acknowledged his identity. I've heard about you from Cursed Wrist and Chaldea's master. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Villo. After Wu Ming left, Cursed Wrist and Gadatsi must have told Arash about Wu Ming. The thank you that Arash mentioned was naturally referring to Mordred's sudden attack. After all, if Wu Ming was not there, who knew what would have happened today? That was why Arash thanked Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming shook his head. It's not that hard. After all, he is my comrade. I should be the one apologizing. After Wu Ming said that, he did not say anything else. The same went for Arash. The two of them looked at each other for a while, and then smiled at each other. Ha ha ha, let's skip the pleasantries. It's a little too formal. Indeed, as a friend, it would be too formal to continue the pleasantries. Wu Ming had a good impression of Arash, the great hero. It was mainly because Arash's personality was neither servile nor overbearing. His tone was gentle and he was quite polite. In short, Wu Ming liked to make friends with Arash. Villo the Ransword, King Arthur's subordinate, first knight of the Round Table. Arash Kamengo, King Manuchi Hale's warrior. Then Wu Ming extended a hand. Modern handshake etiquette, I quite like it. Arash did not say anything. He smiled and shook Wu Ming's hand. Then the two of them spoke at the same time. Nice to meet you. The moon gradually moved to the westernmost side, and the sun slowly rose from the easternmost side. The sun shone on the earth. Although the village was in a mess because of the aftermath of the battle, fortunately, there were no casualties. Even Mordred's initial attack had only destroyed a few houses that were used as warehouses and no one lived in them. Wu Ming, Arash, Quiet Hassan, Itatungta, and Tang Sanzang worked together with the villagers to clean up the village. I really didn't expect that a knight of the Round Table would leave here. Itatungta was holding some wooden planks and was slightly surprised. Humph, my second apprentice is here. That guy will naturally leave. Tang Sanzang said proudly as if she was the one who killed Mordred. Although he wanted to complain about Tang Sanzang's speech, Itatungta, who had seen Tang Sanzang's mouth cannon, said that it was better to avoid it, so he immediately changed the topic. By the way, Arash, who is by His Excellency Villo's side, doesn't seem to be ordinary. Itatungta looked at Arash, who was on the other side, sorting out the items with Wu Ming. Arash is also a local servant in this area. He is a legendary figure, who can tear the earth apart. In any case, Tang Sanzang had also wandered around this singularity, so he had a lot of knowledge about the local stories. Therefore, he was no stranger to the great hero Arash. By the way, where did Quiet Donor go? Tang Sanzang thought of Quiet Hassan, and he couldn't find her at all. However, Itutungta shook his head naturally, and he didn't know where she went. In a corner, Quiet Hassan was looking at Wu Ming's figure. Because of the mask, Quiet Hassan's expression couldn't be seen, but from time to time, some words full of nostalgia could be heard from Quiet Hassan's mouth. Servillo. Chapter 766. In the north, near the mountains of East Village, a black shadow was jumping up and down between the mountains, moving toward East Village at a very fast speed. Not far behind this black shadow, several figures were also moving quickly, but they weren't as fast as the black shadow in front of them. Whether it was the black shadow in front or the few figures behind, they were all familiar to Wu Ming. These people were naturally Gadatsi and her party, heading to the Yazril temple. Is Mr. Cursed Wrist in such a hurry? Mushu looked at the figure in front of her that was almost out of her sight, and said to herself in confusion, "After all, it's Cursed Wrist's village. It's normal to be anxious," Hassan and Matthew explained as they ran side by side. Because the Yazril temple was located on a mountain higher than East Village, the scene of DNA helix exploding over East Village last night was naturally reflected in the eyes of Gadatsi and her party. If such a thing had happened in Hassan's village, she would have been very anxious. Don't worry, if nothing goes wrong, Assassin should have returned long ago. With him around, the village will never have any problems. Gadatsi, who was in Matthew's arms, was full of trust in Wu Ming. Hassan looked at Gadatsi deeply, then nodded. But the way Hassan looked at Gadatsi made Gadatsi feel a little awkward. And the reason for the awkwardness was, "By the way, Matthew, why don't you put me down? This position is too embarrassing." Gadatsi whispered in Matthew's ear. When they went there, Gadatsi was riding the car invented by Da Vinci. However, in the Yazril temple, Da Vinci's car had some problems, so Da Vinci stayed to repair her car. Therefore, on the way back, Gadatsi was carried by Matthew. After all, the road was rugged, and Gadatsi could not move alone. It was the best choice to be carried by Matthew, Gadatsi's servant. Anyway, it was unlikely that Hassan and Cursed Wrist Hassan would carry Gadatsi. Even if they were willing, Matthew would not be willing to give the opportunity to carry his senior to others. But if Gadatsi insisted, Matthew would still consider it. "But master, the mountain here is too rugged. Without the help of a servant, ordinary people can hardly move." Matthew denied Gadatsi. Gadatsi also looked around subconsciously. They were now running on the stone wall. If they slipped, they would fall directly. A servant would be fine, but if it was Gadatsi in her human form, she might be done for. Therefore, in Matthew's view, it was too dangerous to let his senior walk alone. "It's okay. Da Vinci is still behind. I'll just take her car." Indeed, there was no sign of Da Vinci around Gadatsi and the others. "Find a place to put me down, Matthew. Da Vinci knows this way. She is a genius. I'll wait here for her to pick me up." The implication was that Gadatsi wanted Matthew and Hassan to go first. "No, I'll stay with master," Matthew said firmly while stopping at a relatively flat place. She, Mushu, could do anything, but she couldn't leave her senior and master alone in this deep mountain. This was a matter of principle. When Hassan saw Mushu stop, he shook his head helplessly. "Then I'll go first," Hassan said, accelerated, and chased in the direction of Cursed Wrist Hassan. Taking a closer look, Hassan's speed in this group of mountains was almost the same as Cursed Wrist Hassan's speed in this place. In other words, Hassan had actually been taking care of Matthew and Gadatsi. Matthew and Gadatsi looked at each other and smiled awkwardly. But since things had come to this point, they could just wait. Anyway, they could chat to pass the time. She had to admit that Da Vinci was indeed a genius. Her car was quickly repaired. "Hey, your genius Da Vinci is here." Da Vinci was driving a strange, small aircraft similar to a UFO, flying toward Gadatsi and Matthew. Lubdavir, who was responsible for protecting Da Vinci, was half squatting on this small UFO. As a knight of the Round Table, he naturally had the unique skill of not falling off from the object he was riding. Da Vinci's speed was very fast. Matthew and Gadatsi only waited for a little while before Da Vinci came over in her UFO. Finally, Da Vinci is here. Gadatsi stood up excitedly. "Did you miss me, the genius?" Tachika Kuan, Da Vinci opened the UFO hatch and motioned for Gadazzi to come in. Gadazzi nodded, walked in quickly, and sat down in the co-pilot seat next to Da Vinci. Lubdavir jumped down from the UFO. Miss Matthew and I will walk. After all, the UFO's design structure could only accommodate 2 people, the driver's seat and the co-pilot seat. Therefore, the surface of this UFO could only accommodate 1 person. I agree with Mr. Lubdavir's opinion. Master, you and Da Vinci can go first. Mr. Lubdavir and I will catch up, Matthew said to Gadazzi in the co-pilot's seat. However, this was the best choice, so Gadazzi also nodded. Then Da Vinci, let's go. The nozzle behind the UFO suddenly sprayed flames, and the entire UFO flew out directly. Wait a minute, Da Vinci, I haven't fastened my seat belt yet. Looking at the UFO in the distance, Matthew and Lubdavir didn't know what to say. Then Lubdavir looked at Matthew, his compatriot. Let's go, Matthew. Yes, Mr. Lubdavir. The two also embarked on the journey to Dongji village. At the forefront, Cursed Wrist Hassan arrived at Dongji village first. Standing on a cliff, he looked down at the messy but not damaged Dongji village, as well as the villagers who were packing up and the servants who helped the villagers pack up. Seeing this, Cursed Wrist Hassan breathed a sigh of relief. At least the village was still there, and the villagers seemed to be fine. Immediately afterward, Cursed Wrist Hassan jumped down. In Dongji village, Wuming, who had been separated from the other servants and was helping the villagers pack up alone, looked in a certain direction thoughtfully. Immediately afterward, Cursed Wrist Hassan appeared in the direction where Wuming was looking. Sure enough, you're back, Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan. Chapter 767. When Cursed Wrist Hassan heard the word as expected, it sounded rather impressive. As expected of His Excellency Villo. Although I didn't use the aura concealment technique, His Excellency Villo was able to discover me in advance from such a distance. Cursed Wrist Hassan complimented Wuming. You're too kind. His Excellency Cursed Wrist also said that you didn't use the aura concealment technique. It's normal for me to discover you. Wuming responded to Cursed Wrist Hassan. After complimenting each other, it was time to get down to business. Since you came back alive, that means you've succeeded, right? As if responding to Wuming's words, Cursed Wrist Hassan tapped twice on his skull-masked face. Yes, thanks to His Excellency Villo, Sir First Hassan didn't do anything to me. Cursed Wrist Hassan's tone was quite grateful. Then Cursed Wrist Hassan stretched out a hand with something in his hand. Taking a closer look, wasn't the thing in Cursed Wrist Hassan's hand the small box that Wuming gave him? I'll return it to you, His Excellency Villo. Cursed Wrist Hassan handed the small box to Wuming. However, Wuming just smiled. Keep it. Maybe it'll be useful in the future. Cursed Wrist Hassan was taken aback, then nodded. If that's the case, I'll accept it. Cursed Wrist Hassan was not a pretentious person. Since the other party said he would accept it, then he would accept it. By the way, where are Tachika and the others? Are they still behind? However, after Wuming finished speaking, the roar of the aircraft entered his ears. Then Wuming searched for UFO and saw it. Wuming was shocked. What the hell is this? Hey Villo, did you miss me, the genius? Da Vinci opened the hatch, quickly walked out, and greeted Wuming. Gadazzi, on the other hand, seemed to be carsick. She was already lying on the platform in front of the passenger seat, twitching non-stop. How did you make it? Wuming asked. This is a flying machine made from the ores I found on the road. Although it can only accommodate 2 people, it is a genuine flying machine. Da Vinci proudly introduced his masterpiece to Wuming. The corner of Wuming's mouth twitched. Building a car out of pure wood and a flying machine out of ore. As expected of Da Vinci, you might as well change your name to Thomas Alva Da Vinci. At this moment, a black shadow appeared in the surroundings. Seriously, isn't it too perverted to sit on this thing? The person who came was none other than Hassan. At this moment, Hassan had taken off his mask, and the angry expression on his face was clearly visible. Originally, Baihui Hassan was about to reach Dongji village when a strange big bird suddenly jumped out from behind and almost hit Baihui Hassan. Not only that, this big bird also robbed Hassan of his second person to reach the village record. It was really abominable. What's more, there were 2 people in this big bird. Doesn't that mean that I'm actually the 4th? Furthermore, the one sitting inside was that smiling Da Vinci. That smile was too similar to that of the angel who bullied her. It was really infuriating. At this time, Matthew's voice also came. Senior. Matthew quickly ran into the cockpit and carried out Gadotsi, who was carsick. Putting the unconscious Gadotsi on his lap, Matthew looked at Da Vinci. Da Vinci, what's going on? Da Vinci smiled embarrassedly. Oh, didn't my Da Vinci number 2 get repaired, updated? The speed increased a bit too fast. Don't worry, I set up a safety device. Tachika-san just fainted. However, Matthew couldn't say anything. He could only hold back his resentment and take care of Gadotsi. Servillo. At this time, Bedivere also arrived. Lucius, thank you for your hard work. Wuming greeted Bedivere. However, Bedivere shook his head. Just call me Bedivere, Servillo. I have already told Chaldea my identity. Wuming suddenly realized and then nodded. It seemed that something had happened that made Bedivere open his heart. TSK, I already felt that you were a knight of the Round Table. Hassan looked unhappy. It seemed that she still had a lot of resentment against the Knights of the Round Table. But seeing that she didn't do anything, it seemed that Hassan also understood that resentment shouldn't be vented on allies. Senior Villo, you and Mr. Bedivere really hid it from us. Matthew said with a little temper. Sorry, but even so, I still think it's better for Bedivere's identity to be explained by him. Wuming apologized with a smile. And Matthew was just joking, so she agreed with Wuming's words. On Chaldea's side, monitoring Gadotsi's body, Roman couldn't help but complain after hearing it. I thought it was strange at the beginning. Why would Lucius be friends with the Villo? It turns out that it's the relationship between Bedivere and the Villo. Hearing Roman's voice, Wuming frowned and asked, I suddenly feel that your complaints are so weak. In Chaldea, the doctor's back was gray. By the way, doctor, when will Senior wake up? Matthew asked with concern. Gadotsi waking up as soon as possible is the most important thing for her at the moment. It should be fine in a few minutes. Roman looked at Gadotsi's physical data and replied to Matthew. Matthew breathed a sigh of relief. A few minutes, it's not a big deal. In this regard, Wuming spoke. In that case, let's go to the house and wait for a while. Just in time, we can start the battle plan again. The servants looked at each other and nodded. Soon, everyone came to Gadotsi's residence, which was referred to as Chaldean Embassy. By the way, Wuming brought Quiet Hassan, who was rescued, and Tang Sanzang and Kurodota, who were brought back by the way. Just then Gadotsi woke up. Matthew, I seem to see my deceased grandmother waving to me. Mushu was so scared that she didn't know what to do. What? Senior, you have to cheer up, Senior. Wuming laughed involuntarily. Well, Tachika, there are new partners here. Don't bully Matthew like this. After Gadotsi woke up, Wuming introduced Tang Sanzang and others to Cursed Wrist and others, and then began the battle meeting. First of all, report your situation in Azrael Temple, Tachika. Chapter 768. Yes. Gadotsi stood up and saluted. After explaining the details, Gadotsi summed it up in one sentence. After successfully arriving at the Azrael Temple, we passed the trial of the first Hassan. After showing the token you gave to the first Hassan, Cursed Wrist Hassan was fine, and the first Hassan said that he would help Chaldea save humanity. That's all. Very well, since the assassin agreed, then he will definitely help us at the right time. We don't have to pay attention to this for the time being. Wuming nodded with satisfaction. Sure enough, after the first Hassan saw that he was here, he made a big promise. Helping to save humanity was not just helping to save the humanity of this singularity. If the last singularity, which was the Mesopotamia singularity, had the help of the first Hassan, it would be a great help. By the way, Villo Senior, what happened in the village last night? Matthew raised his hand and asked. Mordred found this place and launched an attack. In the end, because of excessive overdraft of the spiritual base, she left. The village was slightly damaged and no villagers died. Wuming reported quite concisely. Mordred. Gudatsi thought of the Mordred in the London singularity. Don't be sad. The servant is just a clone of the heroic spirit. The Mordred in this singularity is not necessarily the Mordred you met. Because she is the Mordred I met. Wuming added in his heart. She betrayed the king when she was alive, but she can't see the traitor this time. It's really ironic. Wuming shook his head silently. However, Mordred has left after all, which saves you from not being able to kill her. Sorry. Matthew and Gudatsi said in unison. Wuming waved his hand indifferently and continued to speak. Then let's move on to the main topic. Wuming became serious. After looking around at everyone, Wuming opened his mouth. Everyone, I plan to attack the holy city tomorrow morning. Everyone exclaimed in unison. Isn't this a little too early? Hassan asked tentatively. Indeed, and I think it's a little rushed. Cursed wrist Hassan nodded. Actually, it's not fast at all. Wuming shook his head and continued. When I was rescuing Serenity Hassan, I met a Gwawan. Hearing this, everyone's heart froze. I'm afraid he's already guessed that I've teamed up with the mountain people, and will be on guard against us. That's why I'm suggesting an immediate attack tomorrow. I see. The best defense is offense. Cursed wrist Hassan nodded thoughtfully. That was what Wuming meant. If they attack tomorrow, the other party might not expect Wuming and the others to attack so quickly. That would catch the other party off guard. Of course, in addition to that, there was another reason. The village has been discovered by Mordred. Who knows if she has already asked the Knight of Solemnity to send a message to the Holy City. However, with Mordred's temperament, it was unlikely that she would make such a delicate decision. The possibility of Mordred not having any Knight of Solemnity following her was too small. In addition, Lancelot also told Wuming that Mordred had a small number of Knights of Solemnity. Therefore, if Mordred's Knights of Solemnity did not show up, it was more or less possible that they had returned to the Holy City. Or rather, it was more reasonable for her to order the Knights of Solemnity to don't follow me. I want to start ravaging alone. After that, all the Knights of Solemnity returned to the Holy City. After all, that was Mordred, wasn't it? Assassin, do you mean that the Holy City might strike first and send the Knights of Solemnity to attack us? Gudatsi asked thoughtfully. Wuming nodded and added. That's not the worst. The worst should be the Lion King's Holy Lance. Arash suddenly said at this time. Am I right, Your Excellency Villo? Wuming nodded. The Lion King's Holy Lance is tied to the mist anchors on both sides of the planet. Even if it's ordinary power, it's not something an ordinary servant can handle. If it's the true name Liberation, it won't be a problem to launch an attack from the Holy City. Wuming said something rather terrifying. If the Lion King knows our location, Matthew said lightly, then aren't we in danger now? Gudatsi continued Matthew's words, looking shocked. So everyone is busy packing up and moving now. Arash pointed outside the window. Not only that, because some of the buildings in the village were destroyed, and because of the aftermath of me and Mordred, many houses are already in danger. The combination of the former and the latter, leaving is the best way. Well, but where can we go? Cursed wrist Hassan thought. Let's go to the West Village, Wuming said. My village? 100 Faces Hassan was shocked. But Your Excellency Villo, the West Village is indeed not far from the East Village, but that's only for us. It's impractical for the villagers to move there en masse. Cursed wrist Hassan was not trying to undermine Wuming's plan. If it was a few villagers moving, it would be fine, but this time, the villagers were moving en masse, and the difficulty had increased by many times. However, Wuming did not find it difficult. Don't worry. My ability, the portal, allows me to connect two places I have been or seen at will. There is no time limit, and I can set the size of the portal myself. So it's not difficult for the villagers to move en masse. Yeah, I forgot that Assassin has this ability. Gudatsi clenched her left fist and hit her palm. After moving the villagers of the East Village, we can start preparing in advance. After everyone sleeps for a night, I'll use the portal to teleport everyone over the next morning. If a Gwawan was here, he would definitely scold Wuming for cheating, because Wuming had entered the Holy City and walked around once. Of course, if the Lion King's holy lance was still maintaining the light film, Wuming's portal might not be able to pass through. So, it would depend on the situation when the time came. Question: why don't we attack at night? Quiet Hassan, who had not spoken much, spoke up. Wuming did not even need to answer this question. Gudatsi and the others were very clear about this question. It's all because of Gawain, Gudatsi and Matthew replied in unison. Chapter 769. As people who had witnessed Gawain's power, Matthew and Gudatsi still remembered it clearly even now. The Knights of the Round Table were all given different blessings by the Lion King with the Holy Grail, and Gawain's blessing is everlasting. As the name implies, as long as he is around, it will always be daytime, Wuming explained. Therefore, even if Gudatsi and the others chose to attack at night, once they arrived at the Holy City and encountered Gawain, it would become daytime because of Gawain. As the gatekeeper of the Holy City, Gawain basically would not leave the gate of the Holy City. Therefore, the probability of them encountering Gawain was 100%. Therefore, Wuming said that it was better to wait until the day to attack. Then there's no other way. Hassan expressed that he understood. After the villagers are relocated and settled, we'll use one night to recharge and prepare for the attack at dawn the next day. Everyone nodded, and then began to move the villagers. First, they gathered the villagers who had already packed their things to a slightly open area in the village. Then Wuming walked to the center, waved his hand, and opened a black-purple ripple. However, this ripple was only the size of a person. Immediately afterward, Wuming looked at Baijiu Hassan. Baijian, come with me first. After all, that was Hassan's home ground. It was not a bad idea to let Hassan return to the West Village to make arrangements. Hassan nodded. She was not stupid. On the contrary, she was very smart, so she naturally understood what Wuming meant. She walked to the portal, adjusted her mentality and walked in first. Immediately after, Wuming looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others behind him. I'll expand the area of the portal later. At that time, you can start to arrange for the villagers to go in. Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others all nodded. Then, Wuming pounced forward and entered the portal, his figure completely disappearing. In the blink of an eye, Wuming came to the West Village that he was familiar with. I'll inform the villagers and let them get ready. After Hassan finished speaking, he left Wuming's side as if he was escaping. It seemed that Hassan was quite unwilling to be alone with Wuming. After shrugging his shoulders, Wuming also left the portal. He was ready to head to Abante. Because Abante was hovering vertically over the West Village, it was not difficult to find. Wuming came to the monitoring room in Abante and sat down. Speaking of which, this chair is really comfortable. Wuming patted the sofa chair he was sitting on with a comfortable expression. Translator. WQL editor. Alim, as if it wanted to make Wuming more comfortable, two wooden tentacles stretched out of the floor and started to massage Wuming's shoulders like two hands. Wuming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All right, Abant, I appreciate your kindness. Speaking of which, where's Gilio? The moment Wuming finished speaking, a virtual screen appeared in front of Wuming. The picture on the screen was Gilio. At this moment, Gilio was playing in the nearby mountains. It couldn't be helped. Gilio was unlikely to be with the monkey, and other than the village, there was no one else here. So Gilio could only entertain herself. This guy. Wuming looked at Gilio, who was playing with a soul-eating beast that Wuming had seen once. Wuming showed a helpless expression. Gilio, can't you see that demonic beast is about to cry? Gate. As Wuming chanted the spell, a black-purple ripple appeared beside Wuming. At the same time on the screen, a black-purple ripple appeared below Gilio, who was playing with the demonic beast. Gilio naturally fell into the black-purple ripple and let out a rather cute sound. Ugh. Gilio appeared from the teleportation door beside Wuming and sat on the ground. Master, are you back? Just as Gopril finished speaking, another black shadow fell out of the portal that had yet to close. It fell straight into Gopril's arms as she sat on the ground. Oh, my little cutie, have you followed me too? Gilio smiled and stroked the soul-eating beast's eyeless seaweed head. Then the soul-eating beast opened its mouth and didn't dare to make any sound. As a demonic beast, it had its own instincts. Its instincts told it that this guy who had been playing with it wasn't someone to be trifled with. The person sitting on the chair over there was even more so. It felt like it was in the stomach of a certain creature, and the surrounding ground and walls gave it a strong sense of crisis. Then keep it and play with it. Remember not to let it run around. It won't do if it hurts someone. Wyrm wasn't too concerned about the frightened soul-eating beast. Yes, thank you for your magnanimity, Master, Giliel said to Wyrm with a smile. Then Giliel came to her senses. By the way, Master, why did you suddenly come back? Giliel turned over and sat on the soul-eating beast's back, swaying her legs. The East Village has been exposed. The villagers of the East Village will move over later. Looking at the villagers of the West Village who were gathered by Hassan on the screen, Wyrm explained to Giliel. By the way, did anything happen while I was away? For example, did the West Village expose its location? Of course not, Master. Abant's monitoring ability is very strong. It has monitored everything within a kilometer of the village. As long as it finds anything unusual, it will tell me. Wyrm nodded. After thinking about it carefully, he realized that something was amiss. In other words, Abant has been doing things these days, and you have been playing. In an instant, Giliel broke out in a cold sweat. No. How could that be, Master? I also patrolled around the village. Ahahaha. Just kidding, I didn't expect you to do that. Although Wyrm was right, this sentence still made Giliel a little sad. But it was just a little sad. She would be fine after playing with this soul-eating beast. With that thought in mind, Jillian looked at the shivering soul-devouring beast beneath her. This made the soul-eating beast, which sensed the danger, tremble even more, but it couldn't do anything. The powerful aura around it made it dare not move at all. Just when Wyrm decided to expand the portal below, a new image suddenly appeared on the big screen. A knight with a magic bow and long red hair came to the surroundings of the West Village. Tristan. Chapter 770. Wyrm and Tristan were both knights of the Round Table. The two of them had met not long ago, so Wyrm definitely wouldn't recognize the wrong person. Why is Tristan here? Wyrm muttered to himself, puzzled. Tristan was clearly imprisoned at the bottom of the pyramid by Ramses II, so why would he come here? Although there was a possibility of impersonation, Wyrm felt that there was another possibility, and that was Ramses II had released Tristan. It would be fine if he was an impersonator, but if he was released by Ramses II, then it would be a great disadvantage. Just like what Ramses II told Wyrm. Wyrm couldn't be sure if Artoria would attack him with the Holy Lance when the singularity was about to be repaired. Similarly, Wyrm couldn't be sure if Ramses II would stab him in the back at the end. After all, if Tristan was released at this time, it would obviously disrupt the normal progress of Wyrm and the others. Tristan, who had received the reverse blessing, was very powerful. He was no longer sad and was no longer afraid of poison. Using the invisible vacuum blade to kill could be said to be incomparably cruel. When he was stabbed in the back by Wyrm, it was only because Wyrm took advantage of Tristan's unfamiliarity with the enemy's intelligence. Wyrm relied on Tristan not knowing that Wyrm had the teleportation gate trick, so he directly used the teleportation gate to severely injure Tristan. If Tristan were to go to the village now, perhaps no one would be his match. No, Bedivere said that his arm transformed from the Holy Sword had the ability to restrain and weaken the Lion King's blessing. If Bedivere was here and everyone attacked together, it shouldn't be a problem to force Tristan to retreat. However, Wyrm wouldn't let Bedivere suffer so much. Bedivere's body was already riddled with wounds, and every time he used the power of the Holy Sword, it would aggravate his injuries. Let's go, Giliel. Wyrm stood up and opened a new teleportation gate. This was a portal that led directly to the surface. It would be too slow to fly over. Yes, Master. When Tristan's figure appeared on the big screen, Goprel stood up from the Soul-Eater beast's back, or rather flew up. She could tell that Tristan's sudden appearance had disrupted Wyrm's plan. As Wyrm's weapon, Tristan naturally had to solve the problem for his master. The master and servant walked into the teleportation gate, leaving the shivering soul-devouring beast alone in Abanti's body. Vaguely, the floorboards began to wriggle as tentacle-like wooden roots quietly approached the soul-devouring beast. Wyrm exhorted Giliel as they arrived at the portal on the ground that was connected to East Village through the portal. Someone will come later. Remember to look here. Understood, Master. Giliel turned around elegantly, scattering a few feathers. Nodding, Wyrm waved his hand, and the portal that could only accommodate one person instantly widened. It could now accommodate more than a dozen people at a time. Then I'll leave for a while. Opening a new portal, Wyrm walked in directly. Where did Wyrm go? Wasn't it obvious? He went to look for the rare Tristan that appeared in the wild. On Tristan's side, he was almost at West Village as he pursued the traces of humans. But for some reason he kept walking around West Village as if he couldn't find the way to West Village. However, no one would believe that a Knight of the Round Table couldn't find the way to a mountain village. Suddenly, a voice came from behind Wyrm. Long time no see, Mr. Tristan. Tristan slowly turned around. So it's Lord Villo. I didn't expect you to be here. Tristan didn't look surprised. That's right. The one who spoke was Wyrm, who came behind Tristan through the portal. Wyrm wasn't surprised by Tristan's question either. He casually released his magic and shattered the vacuum trap around him. The impact of the vacuum explosion sent rocks and soil flying. Wyrm flicked the dust on his hand and looked at the place where Tristan walked. Seems like you've set up quite a few vacuum traps, Tristan. It can't be helped, Lord Villo. I don't want to feel the pain of being stabbed in the back again. As expected, setting up a vacuum trap behind him was to prevent sneak attacks from behind. But you've also set up traps so that the villagers can't escape. Seems like you're quite confident. As long as one looked at it with confidence, one could see that Tristan had set up a lot of vacuum traps in places where it was easier to walk. He even set up a few vacuum traps in places where it was difficult to walk or even impossible to walk through. The vacuum trap Wyrm triggered was at the level of a normal person. In other words, as long as a normal person touched the vacuum trap, they would be instantly shredded into pieces by the vacuum trap. Because of the strength of the trap, these traps were useless against Wyrm. However, it was a good choice to act as Tristan's detector like before. Didn't the Sun King lock you up? How did you escape? Although Wyrm didn't sense the master-slave contract he established with Tristan, after meeting him, Wyrm was sure that the Tristan in front of him was the real Tristan. Or is it the Sun King who let you go? Whether it was the Sun King or the Lion King, it wasn't difficult for them to come into contact with the contract in Tristan's body. However, Tristan seemed to have learned his lesson after being questioned by Wyrm. He just smiled and didn't say anything. Who knows, Lord Villo? He also gave Wyrm a shrug. Wyrm couldn't help but frown. Judging from Tristan's reaction, it should be the latter. In that case, I'm afraid you won't answer questions like, have you ever returned to the Holy City, or have you ever sent any news back from this village? However, only Tristan responded to Wyrm with a smile, and the vacuum blade from Tristan's weapon. Bang! The vacuum blade clashed with Wyrm's sword and let out an unprecedented ear-piercing sound. It seemed that Tristan came prepared this time. What a pity, Tristan. Wyrm shook his head slowly and pulled out the meteor silver that floated in front of him from the golden ripples. Come on, Tristan. Chapter 771. At this time, many people gathered in East Village. Gudatsi and others also encountered the enemy. In the corner of the periphery of the village, Gudatsi led a group of servants to hide. Arash, Tang Sanzang, and Da Vinci stayed in the village, responsible for guiding the villagers into the portal, so only Gudatsi, Matthew, Itata, Bedivere, Cursed Wrist Hassan and Tranquil Hassan came here. Gudatsi quietly poked her head out, and found nothing, so she retracted her head. After that, Gudatsi began to complain about her watch. Doctor, are you sure your detection is not wrong? It's true. I have detected a large amount of magic power approaching you, but I don't know why you can't find it. Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's monitoring room, complained. There is another possibility, that is the enemy has a way to hide. Cursed Wrist Hassan said in a low tone. Is it the enemy's assassin servant? Matthew said subconsciously. It may also be Castor. After all, Mr. Roman detected a large amount of magic reaction. The number of the enemy can't be small. Bedivere also said his own analysis. Sir Roman, can you detect how far away the enemy is from us? Cursed Wrist Hassan looked at Gadatsi's watch communicator. It's about 300 meters, Roman replied. 300 meters. Cursed Wrist, who had the modern knowledge given by the Holy Grail, naturally knew how much 300 meters was. So Cursed Wrist Hassan observed the terrain. My village is built halfway up the mountain. It's extremely hidden. If the enemy is still 300 meters away from us, they shouldn't have come up yet. That might be the reason why they didn't see the enemy. So, what should we do next? After all, Cursed Wrist Hassan was a local, and asking him at this time was the best solution. Gadatsi wouldn't force herself at this time. After testing the direction of the wind, Cursed Wrist Hassan came up with a plan. At this time, we have to rely on tranquility, Cursed Wrist Hassan said and looked at Tranquility Hassan. Me? I understand. Quiet Hassan was taken aback, and then he understood. Tranquil Hassan actually had a very low opinion of himself, so when Cursed Wrist Hassan leaned on him, Tranquil Hassan was actually at a loss. However, after sensing the direction of the wind, she understood. However, Gadatsi, Matthew and the others, who were not familiar with Quiet Hassan, did not understand. Tranquil Hassan's body fluid is highly toxic. It can evaporate with the wind, and the current direction of the wind is downwards. Cursed Wrist Hassan did not finish his explanation, but Gadatsi and the others understood what was going on. As long as Quiet Hassan sweated and let the sweat evaporate, and then the highly toxic sweat would be passed down with the wind, it could achieve the effect of silently killing people. Coincidentally, Tranquil Hassan has a kind of footwork that is specially used in conjunction with his poison. After Cursed Wrist Hassan finished speaking, he looked at Tranquil Hassan who had already walked forward. It's called the silent dance. Everyone followed Cursed Wrist Hassan's gaze and looked over. Tranquil Hassan began to dance. It was a very simple dance. As long as one remembered a few simple footwork, even an ordinary person could perform it. However, the main function of this dance was not its difficulty, but its ability to quickly make the dancer sweat. Gradually, Tranquil Hassan's body began to sweat. A cold wind blew, and the poison invisible to the naked eye was carried away by the cold wind from Tranquil Hassan's body to the bottom, which was the direction where the enemy was expected to appear. At the end of the dance, a large amount of deadly poison was evaporated into the air below by Tranquil Hassan. It's over. Tranquil Hassan took a breath and said to Cursed Wrist Hassan, and the others who were hiding behind him. Now all they needed to do was wait. I hope Sir Arash and the others can hurry up. Cursed Wrist Hassan prayed. In East Village, Arash shouted loudly. Everyone speed up. Faster, faster. Along with Arash, Tang Sanzang and Da Vinci were also arranging and directing the villagers to enter the portal. I hope there are no accidents on Sir Villo's side. Arash looked at the portal worriedly and said slowly. The scene changed to Wuming and Tristan's side. Boom. As if the atmosphere was about to explode, the symphony bombarded Wuming's sword and made an explosive sound. And Wuming's magic power was also like free, crazily releasing magic power as sword aura. Boom crack. Tristan dodged a few magic sword auras as light as a swallow, and the sword aura hit the mountain, causing it to explode. This made Wuming frown in displeasure. With West Village nearby, Wuming could not increase the amount of magic power released. If he accidentally blew up the village, it would be terrible. And as an ADC, Tristan naturally chose to distance himself from Wuming. And because Tristan's attack was not as exaggerated as Wuming's and only used vacuum attacks, he was not afraid of blowing up the village. Rather, Tristan wished that he had the ability to blow up the village above, but unfortunately he didn't. However, this was beneficial to Tristan. Although it was inconvenient to move in the mountains, it was the same for both sides. However, Wuming was afraid of the slightest thing, but he could let go of it. Moreover, he was already on guard against Wuming's portal. Tristan dared not say that he could defeat Wuming, but he was sure that Wuming would not be able to defeat him in a short time. It seems that you've really set me up, Tristan. Wuming wasn't a fool. He naturally saw that everything around him was disadvantageous to him. You can't blame me for this, Servillo. Tristan replied with a smile. It was impossible to tell that he was a ruthless character who had accepted the reversal. But, aren't you mistaken? Wuming said softly. Wuming had never been a Villo. On the contrary, the Villo had always been him, always been Wuming. Then let the second round of the game begin. Wuming said and suddenly flew towards Tristan. This gave Tristan a fright. Flying was a dream for ordinary people, and it was the same for knights. Because without magic, it was impossible to fly. And Tristan was a knight, so naturally he had no fate with flying. I forgot that Servillo isn't an ordinary knight. Although there weren't many knights who could use magic, it didn't mean that they didn't exist. Wu Ming was the most mysterious member of the Knights of the Round Table. The fact that he knew magic had spread throughout the Knights of the Round Table. Wasn't the portal the best proof? Tristan scolded himself for underestimating his opponent. However, the most important thing right now was to deal with Wu Ming, who had flown in front of him. Chapter 772. In East Village, Gadotsi and the others were still waiting for the enemy's attack. By the way, which force will the enemy be this time? Gadotsi chatted with boredom. We, the mountain people, have a grudge with both the Sun King and the Lion King. It's the same over there, but I think it's the people from the Holy City. After all, Ramses II's men were all Sphinx, and it was not convenient for them to move around in this mountainous area. Is that so, the people from the Holy City? Gadotsi nodded. And when she thought about it, it was indeed the case. However, at this moment, a few screams and panicked voices suddenly came from below. Someone must have been poisoned. Gadotsi and the others were overjoyed. However, it was followed by more screams and panic, which meant that the enemy was really attacking. To be honest, Gadotsi would rather it was Roman's instrument that was wrong, but the fact was right in front of her. The enemy was attacking. It should be the people from the Holy City. Cursed Wrist Hassan seemed to have heard the sound of the armor, and said with certainty. However, this had nothing to do with what they were going to do next. Although I don't know how many people there are, the enemy's troops are in chaos because of the poisoning. This is a good opportunity. A light flashed in the eyes of the skull mask on Cursed Wrist Hassan's face, and it looked quite strange. Although Cursed Wrist Hassan looked quite scary at the moment, what he said was very reasonable. Take advantage of his weakness. Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk, there was no need for Cursed Wrist Hassan to remind them to seize the opportunity. Gadotsi and Matthew, who had experienced 5 singularities, had already mastered a high level of combat literacy. However, just when Gadotsi was about to speak, Itatata spoke first. Let me do it. As the only archer here, I should take the responsibility of long-range sniping the enemy. Putting down his rice bag, Itatata stretched out his hand, condensed his magic, and a bow appeared in Itatata's hand. But Your Excellency Ito Toda, I remember. Tranquil Hassan clearly remembered that Ito Toda did not like to fight. Why would he volunteer himself? I don't like fighting, but I won't back down. That would be a disgrace to my name. After saying that, Itafura knocked an arrow on his bow and released it with a swoosh. Then a scream was heard. Ah! As expected of the ancestor of martial arts. You managed to hit the enemy with just a casual swing of your sword. Roman praised in Chaldea. Immediately afterward, Roman discovered many individual heat source reactions from the monitor on the big screen. In the end, because the distance was too far, the instrument could no longer detect them. Tachika, be careful. They have over 100 people. Looking at the dense red dots on the map, Roman gulped. To be surrounded by so many people in such a rugged mountainous area. Was it a miracle or bad luck? Understood, Doctor. Matthew, get ready for battle. Gadotsi promised Roman, then looked at Matthew. Yes, sir. Matthew Gillett, get ready for battle. However, a withered arm blocked in front of Matthew. Don't worry, Ms. Matthew. Cursed Wrist Hassan shook his head silently. How can we take the initiative to attack in such a place that is easy to defend and difficult to attack? Immediately afterward, Cursed Wrist Hassan explained the terrain they were now in. The mountain road leading to the village was a spiral road, and Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others were now in the middle of the spiral. Not only were there a lot of stones as cover, but they were also facing the road below. Due to the small population, the mountain road was quite narrow. It was impossible for a group of people to charge up. It could only accommodate a few people. If the enemy passed by here, then Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others would have a headache, but they did not. Then they were in big trouble. Hearing Cursed Wrist Hassan's explanation, Gadotsi and Matthew immediately thanked Roman. It's all thanks to the doctor. After all, it was Chaldea's instrument that detected the enemy who had not yet arrived. It's all thanks to Villo and Da Vinci. If it weren't for Villo's simplicity, Da Vinci wouldn't have repaired and improved the instrument's strength here. Although that was what he said, he felt that Roman was venting his grievances. Okay, doctor, help us see where the enemy is. Gadotsi comforted Roman, and did not forget to let Roman see the enemy's position. Yes, I'll see. Although it was a little perfunctory, Roman was still very happy. The detection shows that the enemy is at the corner in front where you can't see. It seemed that the enemy was not stupid. They knew that someone was ambushing them in front. It seemed that the enemy was not going to act rashly. Let me do it again, Quiet Hassan suggested. However, Cursed Wrist Hassan rejected it. The enemy is already on guard. I'm afraid it won't be effective. Instead of wasting energy, it was better to wait and see. Our mission is to cover the villagers' retreat. As long as the villagers leave, we'll leave too. Therefore, all they needed to do now was to stall the enemy. Yes, just like how Tristan was going to stall Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming was not someone who could be stopped, and Tristan was not someone who could stop Wu Ming. In other words, Tristan, who was shot to the ground and rolled a few times, spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Tristan felt that he was too sad. He was beaten by Wu Ming so badly that he spat out blood again. Facing Wu Ming, who could use spirit power to fly and quickly approach him, Tristan felt that there was no way to fight this battle. In terms of defense, he was not as thick as Wu Ming. In terms of attack, he was not as good as Wu Ming with Holy Sword. In terms of speed and agility, he was not as good as Wu Ming who could fly. How could he fight? To be honest, if it wasn't for the effect of the reverse blessing, he would have already left the stage. Because this time, Wu Ming was going all out against Tristan. In Wu Ming's view, it was enough to let him go once for the sake of his comrade. After all, if their identities were reversed, he didn't think that Tristan, who had received the reverse blessing, would let him go. He had tried to obstruct him time and time again. Even if he was a comrade, Wu Ming would not tolerate him, not to mention Tristan, who had received the reverse blessing, was too arrogant. Looking at that face, Wu Ming couldn't help but want to beat him up. It's not that I didn't give you a chance, Tristan. I let you make the first move. Wu Ming looked at him as if he had gotten a great bargain. Thank you very much, Master Villo. With a tough smile on his face, Tristan responded to Wu Ming, but his smile was still arrogant. It should be impossible to get information from your mouth. Leave Tristan. With a wave of his hand, the annihilation lock appeared behind Wu Ming, trapped Tristan, and tied him up like a rice dumpling. The annihilation lock could annihilate magic power, and it was made of magic power. In other words, if the annihilation lock continued to affect the servant could leave the stage. Goodbye, Tristan. Chapter 773. I wonder how Tachika and the others are doing. While putting away the annihilation lock, Wu Ming looked in the direction of Nishino village. If Tristan's arrival was not an accident, then there might be enemies in Nishino village. I have to go back and check it out. However, just as Wu Ming was about to leave, he suddenly stopped. Because Wu Ming suddenly thought of something that can be used. Nishino village, where Gadotsi and others were. Gadotsi and others were still in a stalemate with the enemies below. And because the enemy had charged several times, Gadotsi and others also knew the identity of the enemy. Knight Suzheng of the Holy City. Every time the person who charged up was wearing Knight Suzheng's armor. Although there was a possibility that someone else could impersonate him, the probability was too low. By the way, because of Itata's bow and arrows and cursed wrist Hassan and Huga Hassan's daggers, those knights who charged were repelled. Amazing, worthy of being a hero of the past. Even though he was now very mature, Matthew still looked at these servants with awe. Whether it was the bow, arrow, or dagger, they all hit Knight Su Zheng's knee through the gap in the armor and forced Knight Su Zheng to retreat. Although he also had the advantage of the terrain, a hero is still a hero. Roman, who was assisting in the battle, knew more than Matthew, so Roman also sighed. That's all I can do. Tranquil Hassan said that she did not feel that she was very powerful. Tranquil is right. We Hassan are just people who walk in the dark. In the end, we can't do anything. Cursed Wrist Hassan agreed. Then Cursed Wrist Hassan looked at Itata, who had his bow and arrow aimed below to prevent the enemy's sudden charge. Sir Itata, your skills are beyond my expectations. Originally, Cursed Wrist Hassan only wanted Itoto Sato to deal with Solemn Knight, because he was an archer. Who would have thought that Kurodo Ta was so skilled? Cursed Wrist Hassan had never seen Kurodo Ta miss. Basically, every arrow hit the enemy's knee. Haha, Lord Cursed Wrist, you flatter me. I'm just a crude person who likes food. Although he said that, Itafuta actually enjoyed Cursed Wrist Hassan's praise. This was a good reflection that the other party was indeed a bore. Most of the villagers should have moved away by now. We can't keep wasting time like this. The enemy has basically figured out our numbers. Cursed Wrist Hassan was a little worried. Every time the Solemn Knight charged, it was as if the position was predetermined. If Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others attacked, they would gradually expose the number of people who could attack from a distance. If they did not attack, the other party would charge again. And because the other party had groped a lot, the Solemn Knight almost rushed up several times. If it weren't for Matthew and Bedivere to repel the other party when they rushed up, I'm afraid the enemy would have already rushed up. However, because of this, the other party almost figured out the exact number of people on their side again. All kinds of phenomena showed that the other party had a wise commander. As long as he was given a little more time, he would probably command the Solemn Knight to charge up. With this thought in mind, Cursed Wrist Hassan suddenly realized something. How long has it been since the other party launched a charge? About 10 minutes, Roman, who was a combat support, reported. But if I remember correctly, the Solemn Knight's charge is very regular. About 5 minutes, Roman said again. Could it be that the other party has made a new move? Gudatsi also realized the problem. Since the other party has broken the pattern, I'm afraid it's really like what Her Excellency Tachika said. The other party has made a new move. Quietly poking his head out, Cursed Wrist Hassan looked down and found that the other party did not show any signs of charging again. Then Cursed Wrist Hassan looked at Gudatsi and spoke as if he was asking for a discussion. Let's retreat, Her Excellency Tachika. Staying here now was tantamount to waiting for death. Besides, the villagers of Dongji village were almost done with their relocation. After Gudatsi nodded, everyone immediately began to retreat toward Dongji village. At the corner below, the Solemn Knight lined up neatly on the mountain road. The commander at the front was a knight in purple armor, and a girl with brown skin wearing revealing clothes. The two of them were Lancelot and Nidicles. There was no doubt that the magician who helped the Solemn Knight army advance was Nidicles. What's wrong, Lancelot Knight? Aren't you going to charge? The other party might have run away. However, in the face of Nidicles' words, Lancelot just closed his eyes. I know what I'm doing. What a joke. Although his daughter did not notice him, he did notice the other party. It was not easy to find the organization Wuming in order to impress his daughter. How could he go against his daughter at this time? If she could say, "You did a great job, Dad," when the time came he would die without regrets. So it was fine to drag it out now. Even if the higher-ups held him accountable afterwards, what was there to be afraid of? Anyway, he would have to turn against them later. This was Lancelot's fantasy in his mind with his eyes closed. Nidicles looked at Lancelot with a rather wretched smile with disgust. Obviously he looks okay, but he actually shows such a smile. It's really disgusting. But it's good not to attack. Anyway, Sir Osmendes only said to help the people of the Holy City. I used magic to bring the other party's troops here, which can be considered as help. In fact, it was not only Lancelot who discovered Matthew through the last wave of the previous charge, but Nitocles also discovered Matthew. However, although it was Sir Osmondes's idea, Nitocles would be happy if she could comply with Sir Osmondes's idea, and at the same time ensure the safety of Matthew and the others. Anyway, she was not from the Holy City, and the Lion King had no right to question her. When the time came, she could just push the responsibility to Lancelot. In this way, the two leaders stopped communicating and were in a stalemate. This made the solemn knights suffer. They could only wait here foolishly. It could not be helped. As a knight, the most important thing was to obey the orders of the higher-ups. If something happened, they could just push the responsibility to the leader, Lancelot. It was impossible for Lancelot to betray them. In this way, the solemn knights also relaxed. A large group of people waited here quietly, waiting. Chapter 774. They quickly returned to East Village. And it was Arash who greeted Gadotsi and the others. "You're back. Everyone, hurry up and evacuate. The villagers have already retreated," Arash said. "Then let's go everyone." With Gadotsi's order, everyone passed through the portal and instantly arrived at West Village. No matter what, I feel it's incredible that you can teleport over such a long distance. Villo is really abnormal. Roman, who was sitting in the Chaldea control room, watched Gadotsi's coordinates move to a place far away in an instant, and he couldn't help but sigh. Ignoring Roman, Gadotsi immediately looked at the villagers around the portal. "Everyone, let's go. There shouldn't be anyone left behind, right?" The villagers all shook their heads, indicating that no one was left behind. "By the way, why don't I see Miss Hassan and Senior Villo?" Matthew looked around. Other than the few followers and Gadotsi, there were only the villagers of East Village and the villagers of West Village who came to join in the fun. They probably left for a while, but with Assassin's character, she should have left someone to take care of us. "Of course, I'm the person my master left behind to take care of you, monkey you." A rather lively voice reached the ears of Gadotsi and the others. Following that, an angel-like figure slowly floated down from the sky, accompanied by a flurry of feathers. "I remember you are Miss Goprel, right?" Matthew was happy that he still remembered the other party's name. "Although as a monkey, although you called my name directly, you are Master's friends." Sigh. Goprel shrugged and looked rather helpless. "If Master finds out that I'm rude to these monkeys, he will definitely hit me on the head." Therefore Goprel, who chose to follow her heart, suppressed the thought that she couldn't see through the monkey in her heart. Master found something unusual around this village. Combined with the sound just now, I'm afraid there are enemies attacking. Goprel crossed her legs, crossed her arms, and maintained a lying posture, floating in the sky. Since the enemy is attacking, we should go and help Assassin." Then Gadotsi looked at Matthew. "Let's go, Matthew. Your Senior Villo needs help." "Yes, Master." With a wave of his hand, Matthew materialized his shield and was ready to go. Master's battle ended long ago. Besides, Master is not a weakling who needs help, Giliel suddenly said. At the same time, he emitted a terrifying aura. The villagers were so scared that they didn't dare to move, and the servants present were also in a state of facing a formidable enemy. "Tachika, be careful. This guy is super dangerous." Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea, detected the magical power of Goprel through the instrument. She was no longer an ordinary servant. She was even stronger than a first-class servant. "Even if you say so, Doctor, what can we do now?" Swallowing her saliva, Gadotsi quietly talked to Roman. "Of course, Master likes the weak very much, so I won't do anything to you." As if the prank was successful, Goprel instantly put away her terrifying aura and put on a cute smile. But no one would think that Goprel was a little girl, because of her cute smile. "You're scaring people again, Goprel." At this time, a familiar voice came through. Wuming's figure appeared directly behind Goprel, and stretched out a hand and pressed on her head. "Master, you're here, ahaha." The smile on Goprel's face changed again, from a cute smile to a harmless smile, and it was getting stronger and stronger. Remember, don't scare people in the future. However, Wuming just patted Gopril's head and didn't do anything to Gopril. Master? In Gopril's opinion, after scaring so many people in such a big occasion, he should at least be punished a little. Without saying much, Wuming patted Gopril's head and landed on the ground. It feels like Master is a little unreal. Gopril narrowed her eyes and looked at Wuming, who landed on the ground. But immediately, Gopril returned to her original state. Just as Gopril said before, Wuming was not so weak that he needed help. Naturally, Wuming was not so weak that he needed her, Gopril, to be suspicious of him. After all, even if it was unreal, it must be Wuming's doing, so there was no need to worry. Gopril, who thought it through, flapped her wings and flew down. Is 100 Faces Hassan here? After Wuming landed, he immediately looked for 100 Faces Hassan. I'm here. 100 Faces Hassan answered, and immediately stood out from the crowd. In fact, she had just arrived, which was why she squeezed out from the crowd. You and Cursed Wrist Hassan, settle the villagers down for the time being, find a room, and start the emergency meeting immediately. Looking at Wuming's serious expression, 100 Faces Hassan obediently guided the villagers with Cursed Wrist Hassan. After 100 Faces Hassan prepared a house for Wuming and the others for the meeting, Wuming and the others gathered together. Did you find something unexpected? Da Vinci was the first to ask. In fact, other than some strange things, Da Vinci was quite reliable. I met Tristan nearby. Didn't he sign a contract with the Senior Villo? And the Senior Villo sent him to the desert? Matthew's meaning was clear. Why did the other party suddenly come here? It's really strange, and as far as I know, Tristan should have been suppressed by Ramses II under his pyramid. However, Tristan came out. And if I'm not wrong, you guys have also met the enemy, right? Wuming looked at Gadotsi. Gadotsi was taken aback, then nodded. The timing of the arrival of people from these two villages is too coincidental, so I have to think. I suspect that this is a premeditated joint attack. Immediately after, Da Vinci touched his smooth chin. In other words, you suspect that the Sun King and the Lion King have joined forces. What? Gadotsi and the others were obviously shocked. That's impossible. Cursed Wrist Hassan immediately began to deny it. The Sun King and the Lion King fought for so long. And in the end, because of the stalemate, they were forced to make a non-aggression agreement with each other. I don't think these two enemies will join forces. However, Wuming did not agree. There are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests, not to mention. Wuming paused and did not say anything else. Da Vinci, who probably guessed it, just smiled and did not speak. The others could not guess. In the end, Bedivere, as a Knight of the Round Table, spoke. Maybe it's because they have a new enemy. Chapter 775. I think Bedivere is right. I think so too. The think tank, Da Vinci nodded and told everyone his guess. Previously, the Sun Monarch and the Lion Monarch fought as equals mainly because the third force, the Mountain Folk, was too weak. Although it wasn't nice to say that, it was an established fact. But now there's a new force, which is the new force of angels summoned by the Villo himself. Those angels aren't as weak as the Mountain Folk, so they naturally pose a threat to the Lion Monarch and the Sun Monarch. As such, the polarization between the Lion Monarch and the Sun Monarch has collapsed. Although the triangle was indeed very sturdy, it shouldn't be forgotten that although the Mountain Folk were weak, they were still considered the third force. The sturdy and stable triangle had a fourth force in the middle, which directly broke the stability of the triangle. But in that case, shouldn't the Sun Monarch and the Lion Monarch attack the Assassin's Angels? Why are they looking for trouble with the Mountain Folk? Gadotsi couldn't understand this point. Regarding this point, Wuming spoke. Actually, the Skywing species, which are the angels you speak of, are now hovering above the village with Abant. Sigh. Everyone exclaimed and subconsciously raised their heads. Due to the cover of the roof, they couldn't see outside. But even without the cover of the roof, Gadotsi and the others probably couldn't see Abant 10,000 meters above the ground with their naked eyes. However, these people subconsciously raised their heads to express their shock. Before coming here, Abant carried me past the holy city, So it's not unreasonable for the lion monarch to know that the skywing species are here. Therefore, the sun monarch and the lion monarch teamed up not to deal with the fourth force, or rather, not entirely. They could also wipe out the mountain folk while they were at it. Wait, doesn't that mean that the location of this village is also exposed? Godatsi was shocked. I'm afraid so. Wuming did not think that the Lion King did not know the location of this village. Even the East Village, which was more hidden than the West Village, had been discovered. There was no reason why the West Village had not been discovered. Although that is the truth, fortunately, Tristan has already left the stage. Holy City has lost another fighting force. This was Wuming's assurance after personally sending Tristan off. Moreover, now that we are all here and Abanti is still in the sky, even if the Lion King uses the Holy Spear to attack, it won't have much effect. This can be considered a piece of good news amidst the misfortune. Sitting in Chaldea's control room, Roman leaned back and sighed. Things were getting more and more chaotic. Then what should we do now? Should we attack the Lion King directly or change our plan? Cursed Wrist Hassan said as he looked at Wuming, who had vaguely become the backbone of the entire team. Change the plan is certain, but we can't change it at will. After Wuming finished speaking, he crossed his chest with one hand, touched his chin with the other hand, and began to think. Wuming had begun to doubt whether what the Sun King said to him was misleading him. Perhaps, Wuming was completely deceived by the Sun King's, uninterested in anything look. Why don't we split up? Godatsi suddenly said. Wuming looked at Godatsi. After all, Godatsi had also experienced 5 singularities. She was almost a master who could take charge of the situation on her own. Since she made a suggestion, he had to listen to it. Assassin, you should be able to take your angels to attack the holy city. Then, I will take the remaining servants to the desert to find the Sun King. However, as soon as Godatsi finished speaking, Wuming denied it. No, you can't beat the Sun King. As long as his shrine is still there, he will not die. Not to mention how huge his shrine complex is, it is not easy to destroy it. Ramses II still has the avatar of the sky god around him. Although Nidicles looked very weak, so weak that she was almost kidnapped by Hassan, she was still a character that could not be underestimated. At that moment, Da Vinci suddenly interrupted. The enemy we encountered had the help of a caster servant. There shouldn't be any powerful caster in the holy city, right? After all, they were all knights. In the face of Da Vinci's question, Wuming answered truthfully. The only person with the potential of a caster is a berserker. Although she can also use the caster's power from the perspective of her identity, it should be impossible for her to follow the army. So in the East Village, the caster who helped the Holy City's team should be Miss Nidicles. Matthew felt that he should have guessed correctly. After all, it was a cooperation. The Sun King sent someone Nidicles to the Lion King, and the Lion King also sent someone Tristan to the Sun King. And it also explained why Tristan came to the West Village near the desert. This was a cooperation, wasn't it? Even if Nidicles is not on the Sun King's side, Ramses II, who has the blessing of the Great Shrine, is not something you can deal with. Even if it was Wuming, it would be quite difficult for him to defeat Ramses II with the blessing of the Great Shrine. Even Wuming was quite difficult, let alone others. That was why Wuming was not optimistic about Godatsi. There was no other way. Wuming had a lot of servants, but they were not elite. But looking at the Lion King and the Sun King, even if their subordinates were dead, they were still very strong. What's more, their subordinates were not dead yet. So how about we attack the holy city, and the senior Villo go to the Sun King's side? Matthew said. Since they couldn't do it, then Wuming should do it. However, Wuming shook his head. No, I have something to confront the Lion King face to face and... Wuming paused. The Lion King is not someone you can defeat. You may not be able to pass Gawain's test alone. Well, Matthew sighed. What should they do? In fact, Wuming had a way. After all, he had already used that, but he wanted to see how Godatsi would choose. When Wuming was at his wit's end, Godatsi suddenly thought of something. By the way, what about Wang Hassan? When Godatsi said this, everyone also reacted. Yes, Gadotsi and the others did not go to Wang Hassan to travel, but to ask for help. Since Gadotsi and others returned safely, and they also got the approval of the first Hassan, then the first Hassan would definitely help Gadotsi. Although Wang Hassan didn't say how to help us, he said that as long as we encounter difficulties, he will definitely come to help us. Gadotsi's eyes were quite firm. She believed that Wang Hassan would not go back on his words. But I don't think it will work. Chapter 776. I don't think the first Hassan will be of any help to you in defeating Ramses II. You should know that Ramses II is a man whose head was once cut off by the first Hassan. But Ramses II is still not dead. He relied on his great shrine to reconnect his head and body. What? Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hundred Face Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan were all surprised. Even the first Hassan can't do anything to the Sun King? On this point, Wuming did not reply. The first Hassan did not kill people at will, but since he had made a decision, he would listen to the instructions of the evening bell and carry out the assassination. But if the assassination failed, the result would be like now. After the first Hassan assassinated Ramses II once, he would not do it a second time. Wait. Wuming suddenly realized a problem. Ramses II, who had witnessed the power of the first Hassan, or rather, Ramses II, who had been warned, should not cause any more trouble. However, he was still causing trouble now. Was he not afraid that the first Hassan would really cut him down? In the face of the crown assassin, Wuming did not think that Ramses II, who had an ordinary psionic base, would not be afraid. It turned out that he had been very afraid after that, but now he was not afraid anymore. Tristan, the mountain folk, and Wuming, who had joined forces with the Lion King to deal with Chaldea and the others. In addition, if it were not for the fact that Wuming wanted to transfer the villagers at the last minute, or had such a long-distance transfer method, Wuming might not have come to West Village at all. Let's make another assumption. If Wuming, Abanti, and the Skywing species were not in West Village, but went to East Village where Gadotsi and the others were, then what did it mean for Tristan to come to West Village alone? It meant that West Village would be perfectly wiped out. Tristan, who had received the reverse blessing, had no pity in his heart. Without the existence of Wuming, Abanti and the Skywing species, coupled with Gadotsi and the others who could not support them in time, West Village would undoubtedly be wiped out. The most important point was that Tristan had set up a large number of vacuum traps around West Village. The other party had also indirectly admitted that those traps were used to kill the villagers who had escaped. However, if Tristan knew that Wuming was there, he would not have set up those traps because they were completely useless. However, Tristan had set up so many traps. Moreover, when he saw Wuming, Tristan said, "I didn't expect you to be here." Although it sounded like a joke, Wuming, he felt that it was true. In other words, Tristan wasn't here for Wuming. He was here for the mountain dwellers. What's the benefit? Of course, it's the roots. While attacking East Village, which had a lot of combat power, he also eliminated West Village, leaving the villagers who had escaped with nowhere to go. This was a plan to wipe them out. Even if he wanted to eliminate Wuming, it should not be like this, because it was the same to Wuming whether there were mountain villagers or not. There was no reason for Ramses II not to understand this. However, since the other party did not seem to be here for Wuming, could it be for the master of Chaldea? Wuming glanced at Gadotsi. Gadotsi saw that Wuming was looking at her and smiled back at Wuming. Immediately after, Wuming also smiled back at Gadotsi. Wuming thought of a possibility. If that was the case, it would be terrible. Whether it was for this singularity or for Wuming himself, it was quite terrible. But the premise now was what happened to East Village. I'll go out first, you guys stay here for a while. Before Wuming could finish his words, black-purple ripples instantly engulfed Wuming. In an instant, Wuming arrived at the location of East Village, but at this moment, there was no sign of life in East Village. It could even be said that there were no living things in East Village. Instantly unfolding his mental power, Wuming captured the entrance of the solemn night army hidden on the mountain path of East Village. The leader was Lancelot, and Natacres was also here. Was Da Vinci right? But this was not the point. The point was that Wuming found that the solemn night army had begun to retreat. Although this retreat was somewhat inexplicable, for the sake of Wuming's next guess, Wuming did not leave but waited quietly, pushing his mental power to the maximum. After waiting for a little while, Wuming felt the fluctuation of magic power. One was from the sky in the west, and the other was from the sky in the east. There were attacks coming from both sides of the sky, and the destination was undoubtedly here, East Village. The thick lightning of the temple collided with the sharp and hot light of the holy spear. It was like a nuclear bomb colliding, combining together. In this Dongji village, Wuming, who had already withdrawn from the range of the attack, saw the two attacks turn East Village into nothingness, and became more and more certain of his guess. Wuming recognized these two attacks. One was the attack of the Great Temple of Ramses II, and the other was the attack of the Holy Spear. However, these two attacks were the most powerful attacks Wuming had ever seen. However, such attacks certainly could not be launched consecutively. They should be similar to the kind of attack that accumulated power. Even if Abanti and the Skywings were here, facing a real attack, they would not be able to completely protect East Village. Annihilating the West Village and greatly destroying the East Village. It was as if they were trying to exterminate this special human. If all the humans of this singularity disappeared, then there would be no saving, and humanity's salvation would fail. Wuming could understand why the Lion King attacked the people outside the holy city with the holy spear because she had done it before. The holes in the ground were an example. Those in the holy city were good people, so those outside the holy city were bad people. Using the holy spear to slaughter the bad people was equivalent to preserving the purest human beings. However, Ramses II's approach was quite outrageous. However, if the other party was not Ramses II but Gidea's people, then everything would be fine. Gidea's priority was never to kill Wuming, but something else. Wuming was just the most threatening stumbling block for Gidea. Basically, as long as it was a singularity with Wuming, there would be traces of Gidea. In Winterwood, Floros wanted to attack Wuming, but he was killed by Wuming. In North America, Gidea personally created a few holy grails in order to increase the difficulty for Wuming and Chaldea. In the end, who would have thought that the forces who obtained the holy grail were still no match for Wuming? And one of them was even given away for free? And now, at this singularity, the appearance of the Lion King was not Gidea's doing, so his doing should be Ramses II, who previously held the holy grail. Although Wuming felt that Gidea should still be recuperating, it was the same to send his subordinates. Therefore, Wuming was guessing whether Ramses II's sudden betrayal was caused by Gidea or Gidea's subordinates. Or rather, was Ramses II still Ramses II now? Chapter 777. Wuming did not think that Ramses II was the kind of person who would change his temperament. Clearly, he was fine a moment ago, but in the next second, he directly turned hostile. More importantly, the primary purpose of Ramses II at this moment had become to destroy the singularity and accelerate the collapse of the singularity. Suppose that your task was to kill someone you caught, but in the end, you found that the person you caught was not completely dead, and then someone came to save the person you caught. Then, would you choose to kill the person who was not completely dead? Or would you choose to kill the person who saved the person first, and then kill the person who was not completely dead? Of course, smart people would choose the former, so Ramses II also chose the former, directly destroying the singularity. And it just so happened that this choice was also what Gidea was happy to see. As for the Lion King, no matter what her real plan was, she would also be happy to see the destruction of the mountain people. After all, a group of ants building a nest in front of your house, even if they were harmless, you would not like it. The most important thing was that the Lion King needed to collect pure people, and the impure people had to be destroyed. The traces of the Holy Lance's baptism on the earth could also be very good at explaining all this. Therefore, the Lion King and the Sun King began to cooperate. The Sun King released Tristan and let him destroy West Village, while the Sun King lent Nidicles to the Lion King. An army with caster's magic would definitely be stronger than nothing. If it were not for Chaldea's instrument being indirectly destroyed by Wuming and upgraded several times by Da Vinci, Perhaps Roman would not have found out that someone was approaching East Village. If that was the case, by the time he found out, the solemn knight would have already come to the entrance of the village. Although the solemn knight could not defeat the servants, let alone Wooming and Wooming's skywing species, he could not withstand the solemn knight's many people. And the solemn knight could fight a war of attrition. Moreover, the solemn knight did not need to wipe out the villagers of East Village. What was the role of the solemn knight? There was no doubt that it was used as a foreshadowing, and the real move was still behind. The real move was Wooming's nuclear bomb baptism that he saw with his own eyes. The nuclear bomb baptism directly razed Dongji village to the ground. If everything went according to the original plan, Tristan would have already destroyed the West Village by then. Therefore, it didn't matter whether he destroyed the people of the East Village or not. Through this, Wooming also understood why only Tristan was loitering around West Village. It was because there was no need to send too many people. Tristan alone was enough. According to the original plan, after the villages on both sides were destroyed, without a fixed residence, the villagers would not be able to survive for long. Don't think that just because you're a mountain dweller, you can live deep in the mountains. It's not like you're a non-human. Mountain dwellers are also human. There must be some who survived, but the number of survivors must be quite small. If the Lion King and the Sun King sent troops to search the mountainous areas, the people of the mountains would definitely be wiped out. Of course, all of this could only be carried out under the premise of going according to the original plan. Tristan being discovered by Wooming meant that this plan couldn't be carried out. Even if Wooming wasn't in the West Village, Agbont and Gopril would be enough to make Tristan suffer. However, what Wooming didn't understand was how the other side knew that there were only 2 villages in the mountain dwellers. And how did they discover and attack them almost simultaneously? Wooming still couldn't figure this out. However, if there were Gidea's people on the Sun King's side, or if the Sun King himself had been replaced by the demon god Pillar, knowing the specific location of the 2 villages wouldn't be too hard to accept. After all, it was Gidea. After obtaining the black soil, the other side was much stronger than before. Moreover, if the original Gidea wanted to replace Ramses II, it wasn't impossible. However, Wooming was quite optimistic about this. Looks like Gidea can't sit still anymore. Wooming smiled. After all, it was because he was worried that he took action again. However, the other side didn't expect me to discover Tristan. They also didn't expect me to be able to transfer the villagers of the East Village to the West Village. However, if they continued to wait, the other side might make a comeback. This wasn't what Wooming wanted to see. As the saying goes, offense is the best defense. Even if the plan of Wooming's group was disrupted, because of Wooming, the other side's plan was also disrupted. Next, it would depend on who made the first move. Then let's go back first. Wooming said. Gudatsi and the others were probably anxious from waiting. With a wave of his hand, Wooming opened a teleportation gate and directly went in. In an instant, Wooming returned to the temporary meeting room in the West Village. As soon as Wooming returned, Gudatsi immediately pounced on him. Assassin! We have a way to deal with the Sun King. Gudatsi was quite excited, like a golden retriever eager to be patted by its owner. After patting Gudatsi's head, Wooming said, "Then tell me what is the way." At this time, the servant who had the ability to solve the problem of Ramses II's shrine stood up. About the great shrine of Ramses II, my noble phantasm should be able to destroy it. Wooming took a closer look and it turned out to be a Rosh. So that's how it is. The earth-shattering strike was sublimated and became a noble phantasm. Although that was what he said, Wooming was a little worried. So what was the price? Was it like the legend where the body was directly torn apart? However, Wooming did not ask, and the other people did not speak. Even Roman in the control room did not speak this time. As long as the great shrine is destroyed, the Sun King should not have that kind of powerful immortal ability. At that time, with the help of King Hassan, we can defeat the Sun King. Gudatsi was full of confidence. However, Tachika, you still have to be careful. Wooming looked serious. Anyway, the other party is also a top-level servant. It's impossible for the shrine to be destroyed. I will be careful. Gudatsi smiled and nodded. However, Gudatsi pulled Matthew over. And Matthew will protect me, don't worry. Yes. Yes, Vilo-senpai, I will protect Master. Although he was a little flustered because of Gudatsi's sudden attack, Matthew still replied with confidence. Seeing such a scene, Wuming was almost relieved. Wuming took Gudatsi's hand and said blessings. May the root be with you. No one noticed that a strange command spell was attached to Gudatsi's shield-type command spell. Wuming's strange blessing made Gudatsi stunned, but since it was a blessing, she accepted it. Right. Gudatsi suddenly thought of something. Assassin, do you know what happened to the explosion and the lightning in the sky? Chapter 778. Of course I know, and this has a lot to do with me verifying whether my guess is correct. Afterward, Wuming looked around at everyone. Do you want to listen to my analysis? In this regard, everyone gave the same answer. Of course. Afterward, Wuming told everyone about the explosion of East Village, the joint attack of the Sun King and the Lion King, and Wuming's own conjecture. Of course, Wuming replaced the part about Gitia with the part about the Magic King. After all, in the eyes of Matthew and the others, the Magic King was the culprit. Roman, who was sitting in the Chaldea control room, sighed for a minute. Because Wuming had already sorted out his thoughts, he spoke very quickly. In other words, we are now attacked from both sides. Although the situation was very bad, Da Vinci could still laugh. As expected of Da Vinci's kin. After listening to Wuming's explanation, Matthew looked incredulous. This is too. The Sun King, who was originally neutral and had indirectly helped them, suddenly joined forces with the Lion King and launched such a powerful attack on them. This not only made Matthew somewhat unacceptable, but Gudatsi was also surprised. Of course, these are just my guesses. No one said that this is right. Wuming shrugged. Although Wuming said so, but, according to the Vilo's logic, this is probably the case. Roman, who was in the Chaldea control room, said regretfully. Indeed, everything that is happening now is basically the same as the Vilo's conjecture. It can't be denied even if you want to. Da Vinci still said in a relaxed tone. If the Magic King came in person, that would be terrible. Matthew was quite worried. Don't worry, Matthew, the Magic King can't come in person. Da Vinci's words made him feel surprised. This was what Wuming had wanted to say. Da Vinci smiled faintly when he saw Wuming's astonished expression. We're just struggling at death's door. If the Magic King wants to wipe us out, he can easily do it. Plus, he said that we can't be considered a threat if we haven't dealt with the 7 singularities. Why would such a proud Magic King lower himself to come here? Geniuses were indeed geniuses. Their understanding was also different from ordinary people. After hearing Da Vinci's words, I suddenly feel much more at ease. Gudatsi patted her chest and took a deep breath. Actually, if one thought about it carefully, this was indeed the case because that was without Wuming. If not for Wuming, Tristan would not have gone to the Sun King's place. If not for Wuming, the Sun King would not have been suspected of being possessed and betrayed. Wuming felt that these 2 points were very important. If not for him, perhaps Gudatsi and the others would have a smoother time. However, at this point, there were no ifs. Therefore, Wuming was still very worried. Compared to your focus, I'm more surprised that the Ramses II mentioned by this guy has been replaced. 100 Faces Hassan also spoke. After all, 100 Faces Hassan was a Hassan from a village near the desert. Although she did not have a direct conflict with the Sun King, she had witnessed the Sun King's power. He was a powerhouse full of majesty and dominance. This was as shocking as Afu suddenly saying that she was actually a real girl, and even showing that she did not have a big treasure. It's indeed a little unbelievable. Cursed Wrist Hassan also nodded. I'm just guessing. The truth can only be determined after seeing the person in person. Wuming shrugged, indicating that he was innocent. No matter what the truth is, all of you need to be 120% vigilant. This was the only point that everyone must be clear about. Understood. Gudatsi saluted Wuming, indicating that she understood. Nodding, Wuming looked at everyone. There's no time to lose. Everyone, let's go now and try to fix this singularity today. Huh. Can it be so fast? Roman was quite surprised. Not to mention rushing. Even fighting would take some time. Of course it can be so fast. After all, I'm here. Wuming snapped his fingers. In an instant, a dark purple portal opened under Gadatzi's feet. Ah! Senpai. Accompanied by Gadatzi's scream and Matthew's wail, Gadatzi disappeared instantly. But then, Gadatzi fell from the portal that appeared above Wuming. However, Wuming carried Gadatzi in a princess carry. Woo-woo. You really scared me, assassin. Gadatzi hugged Wuming's neck and acted coquettishly. This made Hasan, who had been quiet on the side, quite jealous. I'm sorry. Wuming said apologetically. He only wanted to make a small joke. And Matthew also breathed a sigh of relief. Phew, senpai is fine. Senpai Villo, don't make such jokes in the future. In the end, Matthew puffed up his cheeks and looked at Wuming rather angrily. If Lancelot was here, he would probably have a nosebleed. Wuming thought so. Then Wuming put Gadatzi on the ground, walked to Matthew, and put his hand on his little head. I'm sorry, I won't be so sudden next time. Forgive me, my dear junior. Oh, okay. Matthew nodded with a flushed face. He couldn't help it. Wuming's smile was too lethal. Gadatzi immediately ran over and separated Wuming and Matthew, and hugged Matthew protectively in her arms. Okay, don't bully my Matthew really. Although that was what she said, Gadatzi actually had a coquettish look on her face, which was quite pleasing. Well, can we get back to the topic? As an honest person, Cursed Wrist Hasan raised his hand. Wuming smiled awkwardly, and then became serious. As you can see, I can connect the places I've been to. I've been to Ramses II's Grand Temple, so I can create a passage that leads directly to the vicinity of the Grand Temple. Wuming had been to Ramses II's place, so there was no problem in building a portal here. Everyone nodded in agreement. Everyone was quite satisfied with this direct home invasion move. But at this moment, Cursed Wrist Hasan asked again. Don't you need to leave a few servants here? I'm still worried about the safety of this village. If they all left, what if the enemy attacked again? This was also very likely. Direction, Abant won't leave. Wuming pointed to the sky. Cursed Wrist Hasan did not speak, and seemed to be thinking. Don't worry, Cursed Wrist, that big guy is still very reliable. As Abant, who had guarded the village for a while, 100 Faces Hasan was quite satisfied with Abant. Since 100 Faces Hasan said so, then okay. Cursed Wrist Hasan compromised, and the last one to speak was Gadatzi. As the master of the servants, she began to cheer them up. Good. Then everyone, the final battle is about to begin. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.